Da, Onan Hagol, Paul Perrin-Lawan. Good morning, everyone, and a very happy St. Piran's Day to you all. And welcome to this public board of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals. Could I just welcome all the board members here in the room at Truro and everybody who's watching online. And just to remind board members that the meeting is live streamed and a recording of the meeting will be placed on the Trust's YouTube channel. And could I also remind members of the public that Teams Live has a feature of live subtitles and you can access them by clicking on the screen. If we could, as usual, avoid the use of acronyms, that would help me as well as members of the public. We don't have any fire alarm drills planned for today, so if the fire alarm sounds, we should all vacate the building and gather at the front of the building in the parking area. And then could I please also advise members of the public, we really welcome questions and hope that you'll ask questions. You can raise any questions that you have by using the Q&A function on Microsoft Teams. The questions will be reviewed by the Company Secretary as per the protocol which is set out in the agenda. And we'll be asking the questions, or you'll be asking the questions through the Company Secretary at item 20. And we allow up to 15 minutes for that particular item. Lindsay Neve, our Company Secretary, will ask the question on your behalf and seek a response from the relevant Executive Director present, or will arrange for a written response to be included in the minutes. So I hope all that's clear. I'm in your hands, but I'm hoping we can conclude by around 1:30, and we'll have a break at around noon, or perhaps slightly before, in accordance with good practice. In terms of apologies for absence, we have had an apology from our Vice Chair, Isabel Down, who has got an unavoidable commitment. But the Chair of our Finance and Performance Committee, Adrian Davis, will introduce the report of the Quality Assurance Committee, which Isabel chairs. And Adrian is joining us online today because he also is unavoidably in another part of the country. Apart from that, I think we're all present and correct.
We have apologies from Uzma Bozai.
Oh, and Uzma, I'm sorry. Yes, Uzma Bozai apologised this morning, but she hopes to be able to join us this afternoon. We'll be joined at item 5, the board story, by Jodie Dodgson, the Director of Midwifery, and we'll be showing a video then and answering questions on the board story. So, unless there's anything else by way of introduction, Lindsay, could we move to item 2, declaration of board member interests relevant to the meeting today? So, we don't have any declarations, which takes us on to item 3, the minutes of the previous board meeting. And our previous public board meeting was on the 9th of January. Could I ask the board whether you're happy to approve those minutes as a correct record? Thank you very much. So that takes us on to item 4, matters arising and the action log, which I'm not going to go through in detail because it's all there for you to see. I just want to check with the Company Secretary whether she would like to raise any items.
Nothing to raise, Chair, just to say that there are quite a few in progress actions, so we will look to make sure that when we next present to board, we'll have as many updates as possible.
Thank you. Are there any questions on any of the items from board members, bearing in mind that Lindsay will be doing her best to clear the decks of the outstanding ones? Okay, if not, can we keep moving? So that does take us on to item 5, the board story, which is a very important part of our meeting. And could I invite Kim O'Keefe, our Deputy Chief Executive and Dual Chief Nursing Officer, to introduce this item, please. Kim.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So today, we've got the presentation, please, Pete. Thank you. So today, welcome to Josie, who is our Director of Midwifery. Today at the board meeting in public, we'd like to share a maternity story, and it's quite a mixed story, and it takes us through the importance of understanding an entire journey, both for mum and family. So on that note, we'll play the video and then open it up to questions. Thank you, Pete.
Traumatic experience saved by one midwife in particular. I was admitted for an induction after having an emergency scan where I was told my baby was experiencing fetal growth restriction at 40 weeks and 1 day. Every team member I encountered at this point explained everything very well. I felt very looked after. After examining me with a spectrum, I was told I was 2 centimetres dilated and therefore the induction was unnecessary and I was escorted to the ward. I have trauma around men, but the male doctor who did this made me feel safe by explaining everything. Once on the ward, I was introduced to the midwives who were looking after me. The student midwife made me feel particularly safe and took her time explaining everything to me. I wish I could remember her name to thank her. My waters were broken and the team soon swapped over to the night team. The 2 midwives I had are a credit to themselves truly. I can only remember Grace's name, because her dedication to my care was so profound it will stay with me forever. But the student midwife was a credit to herself too. I felt so safe to be open and looked after. After being in labour for 4 hours unmedicated, I managed to get to 8 centimetres. This is when I unfortunately vomited, which caused my baby's heart rate to drop worryingly low, and I was rushed to have an emergency C-section. Grace stayed with me the entire time and made sure to uphold my promise of not allowing my partner to see my baby before me. Each member of the anaesthesiologist team introduced themselves to me despite the panic, which I appreciated. I soon woke up and I had a healthy baby boy thanks to everyone's hard work of keeping us alive. I am told by my partner that Grace was very dedicated in supporting me even when I was out of it, which makes me very grateful. She made sure my baby had been fed and I was cared for. I again wish I could thank her and the other student midwife that looked after me. After a while, Grace had finished her shift and said her goodbyes, which I wish I was more aware of. I'm so sorry to the student midwife. I do wish I remember your name. I was assigned more midwives until I was put in the Wheel Fortune ward. This is unfortunately where I feel my care completely dropped for a period of time. I was left there for hours with a catheter that I had to personally ask to be removed and emptied after nearly 12 hours. I was under the impression that they recommended you're up and walking by the 12 hours to ensure everything is okay. I had 2 cannulas, 1 in each hand, and had to ask 4 times for them to be removed. I felt so unclean downstairs, but no one came to check if I wanted to clean up, to walk around. I was left there to lay my own blood, etc. I had to unfortunately get my visiting friend to ask to get help for me, which the team did provide after. I'm really thankful for the nighttime team that night, however, who put up with me ringing the call bell every hour because I was so scared and out of it. An international midwife took very good care of me, helping me express and get the hang of breastfeeding. I was so sleep deprived that I was offered my own room, which was a literal godsend, so I send my thanks to whoever arranged this. I continued to struggle that night, and my partner was allowed to stay the next night with me. I was left alone that night, but I think it was more because they were worried about my sleeping and mental health. Overall, a positive experience that has been traumatic medically. Had a few bumps in the road support-wise. Thank you again to Grace and the student midwife.
As a team, we were deeply saddened by this patient's story, and we have been able to reflect and consider some actions through our triangulation process. We have now a basic care and maternity support worker training day, which is now embedded, and this started earlier in the year. We've also introduced back to basic care rounds on the postnatal ward every 4 hours. This is a personalised check-in for every new parent. We were also on our second listening week in October. This is annual for our staff to remind staff of what really matters. This includes poems from service users and video clips of how care should be delivered. in a simulation format. We hope that our reflections and actions help others on our continued journey of improvement.
This story was received on Care Opinion. The idea of using Care Opinion was to ensure that the Trust was being open, transparent and more responsive to feedback. The cost of Care Opinion dramatically increased since the initial implementation, so, as a cost-saving exercise, we began developing our own in-house system in collaboration with SITS and the communication team. This platform will be made publicly accessible and will also provide us with greater ownership to create a bespoke service tailored to our patients and their families. We are hoping to launch by the end of September, with a plan for promotion with the communications team.
So before I open up for questions, as we know, and you can tell by the story, we now have our own in-house platform, and we know that we welcomed the story at board, I think it was 2 months ago, so it's just noting that update. And I think it just reiterates the importance of viewing a patient journey, as I've said in the beginning, and understanding where the touch points were, where we could improve. And you can already see the work that maternity and Josie have undertaken, and Josie's here today for any questions. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kim. Welcome, Josie. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I think it's a really balanced story, but I think the thing that came through for me was the importance of the simple things, which sometimes are missed. So I think the importance of a simple introduction as you're walking into the room, this was really acknowledged by the service user, and that really impacted on her experience. So I think if we go back to basics, and it is our second back to basics, and it is a theme that comes through that we are sometimes missing our simple things, and there are no excuses for it. In addition to the actions that I outlined there, because it was a story from the summer, I believe, or a bit earlier. And we're also doing bay nursed care now, and we've slightly altered the area where the nurses station is held, so we reduce the amount of computers there, so the work isn't done there, it's actually done in the bays. Now it's very restricting when we've got partners staying and the space in the bays, but that's an additional thing that we're hoping to see some improvements.
Thank you very much, Josie. And while I've got the opportunity, could I just thank you for the hour you spent of your very valuable time showing me around maternity, which was extremely valuable to me. And thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for everything you and your colleagues do. Kim, is there anything else from you?
No,
or could we throw it open to comments and questions? Ian Dean is our Chief Finance Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Josie. Nice to see you. So yeah, a really powerful story, I think. I just wondered, there was a couple of points where the patient talked about the student midwife and the fact that they wish they knew their name, and I just wondered how we can do more to create that feedback loop, because I imagine that would be incredibly valuable feedback to the student midwife in terms of the amazing care that she provided, and clearly is important for the patient to have that connectivity to people who gave her outstanding care. So I just wondered if there's any more you think we can do on that, or how we help facilitate that.
So I think from our perspective, whenever we get any feedback where they're unclear, we do the research into who it was, and we give that direct feedback. So the loop is closed from our perspective, but for any other, I'm not sure how else we would do it, but we would definitely, because we feedback directly to the patient, we used to via Care Opinion on the section, and we can get in contact with them because we can't contact them directly, but we offer them an email address. So I think the loop is already there. We absolutely make sure that every staff member receives the feedback, and we're able to look at who cared for that patient by looking at the electronic record. So it's not onerous, and we know that everybody likes feedback. So yeah.
Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Ian. Any other questions? So if not, could we thank you very much for that, Josie? I mean, there was some very good practice demonstrated, but also some learning points which you've clearly picked up. So we really appreciate you bringing that story to our attention. Was there somebody else?
Robin
Sorry?
had a question.
Robin.
more comment than a question, but Josie, I think you and the team should be incredibly proud to have that feedback about how you were very patient-centred when that patient had set out some of their anxieties that you supported, and just knowing the pressure that the maternity team are under through other routes that have come back through to us, it just goes to show that those core principles your team is still getting right. So it's a thank you to you and your team
Thank you.
for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Robin is our Chief Operating Officer. And I think we've got Richard Kramer, Executive Director.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to take advantage of you being here just to ask about the service as a whole in terms of how we support and train our staff, and do we have any gaps in staffing at the moment?
At the moment, we are recruited. I think we've got 0.2 of a whole-time equivalent outstanding at the moment. So we've got a rolling recruitment as each midwife or maternity support worker hands in their notice. We openly recruit, we don't hold posts. Our maternity support worker turnover rate is slightly higher than normal, and that is due to maternity support workers leaving to go on to the midwifery profession. So we can't really win with that one. So we have got some vacancies in the support worker role at the moment, and our numbers for students, we're liaising closely with the university around the future, because we know our vacancies at the moment are very stable, but we know that the workforce in the next 10 years is going to change again. So at the moment it is stable for Cornwall, and we're really pleased that our retention rate is good, but we know that looking ahead and looking at the forecast, that this, especially with the scrutiny and the pending investigation, the Amos, Baroness Amos, we don't know what's going to come of that. So there are some, I would say, are gaps in our service, and we welcome the Birth Rates Plus review around specialist cares. At the moment, we're working within our establishment, but as a service, we feel that there needs to be a little bit more resource within our specialist teams, but we'll work on that when we get the next Birth Rate Plus recommendations.
Thank you, Josie. So I'm just looking at the screen and around the room in case there are any other questions. If not, could we thank you very much then, Josie, for your attendance and for the board story.
Thank you.
Thank you. That moves us on then to item 6, my report. Well, my report is there for you so you can see what I've been up to. Just a couple of updates. The first one is, it would be remiss of me. We did thank Steve for his service at our last public board meeting, but this sadly will be Steve Williamson, our Chief Executive's last public board meeting. So I just wanted to reiterate on behalf of us all our thanks to Steve for his absolutely outstanding service to this trust and to Cornwall and to the wider peninsula over the last 4 years, and to wish him and his family every happiness and every success in Morecambe Bay when he joins in the middle of April. In the meantime, we have, of course, announced that Kim O'Keefe, our Deputy Chief Executive, will be acting Chief Executive in the interim period following Steve's departure. And we've also announced that Bernadette George will take on the mantle, which Kim will have to vacate as acting Chief Executive, of being acting Chief Nurse for the Royal Cornwall Hospitals in the interim period. So we've got a very solid and stable platform in the interim period, but clearly we will miss Steve. And I think it won't do us any harm at all to give him one more round of applause and to thank him most warmly. Steve.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be Chief Executive and work with amazing colleagues across the Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. A couple of other updates on my report. I said I would update you in relation to the appointment of non-executive directors. I'm not in a position to say who they are in public because they're currently going through a process which is mandated by NHS England of fit and proper person tests. But 3 people have been offered the roles and have accepted, and I'm confident that they will be in place by our next public board meeting. One is a clinician, a general practitioner in Cornwall, and she, I think I can say she, because that doesn't narrow it down too much, will be joining us as our clinical non-executive director, which we're required to have. And because of the shift from hospital to community, we thought it would be very valuable to have a general practitioner rather than an acute doctor sitting on our board. So that post is imminently to be filled. And then there are 2 associate non-executive directors, one drawn from the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, again, to reflect the shift to the community and the value of the voluntary sector to our work, and one who has finance expertise, a finance expert, again, to join the board and in due course become a full voting non-executive director to fulfill the mandate that we must have a financially qualified person on the board when Adam Broom sadly has to leave us later this year. So that's an update of where we are, and we hope to make public announcements, Lindsay, very shortly. Anything you'd like to add? Thank you. And the other thing just to mention is the meeting in my report that I referred to with the Cornwall MPs, which is convened by the Integrated Care Board, didn't actually take place on this occasion, so I'm sure it'll be reconvened. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say, and I know Steve Williamson would echo this, that we really welcome engagement with all 6 of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly MPs. They're very welcome to visit our hospitals anytime that they want. And if they've got any queries coming up in their post bags or anything they want to discuss with them, we're always at their disposal as representatives of the public. So that's all from me, unless there are any comments or questions for me. If not, then moving swiftly on to a much more important item, item 7, the Chief Executive's report. Steve.
Thank you, David. I'd like to update board colleagues on 2 additional items not covered in the report because they've come about over the last 24 hours, if that's okay, David. The first one is just to make board members aware that the National Director of Urgent and Emergency Care and Operations wrote yesterday afternoon to all NHS trusts and foundation trusts, to chief executives, chairs, medical directors, directors of nursing and regional directors, setting out a number of additional actions that all trusts should consider to enable the NHS England nationally and trusts locally to virtually eliminate corridor care. So that's an important letter that we received yesterday, and David will ensure that Finance and Performance and Quality and Safety Committee members receive a copy of that letter at the next committee briefing. The reason for mentioning it is it sets out a number of aspects that we should be aware of. The first one is an absolute clear position from NHS England that corridor care should be eliminated across the country. And we know that one of our challenges for an extended period of time has been the use of corridor or escalation spaces within our trust. So we're already absolutely focused on that. The letter sets out that NHS England have established a consistent definition of corridor care. So the detail of that will come to the committee, the 2 committees I've just referenced. But really what that is saying is anybody who's in an inappropriate space, a space which wouldn't have bedhead services, a space which wouldn't have the ability for privacy and dignity through curtains, and a space which wouldn't have mechanisms to dim the lights at night time would be considered a corridor space, whether that be in the emergency department or in wards or elsewhere. And anybody who spends more than 45 minutes in such a space would be considered to be subject to corridor care. There is further detail in the letter providing great clarity on those spaces, but that definition is set firstly. Secondly, the intention for NHS England is to publish nationally, openly and transparently performance by trust on corridor care compliance or not. And I understand that that transparent publication will commence from potentially May this year via NHS England's website. And then there is in the letter a set of additional national actions and support tools available for trusts, including some further GIRFT guidance and an expectation that those trusts that are most challenged will develop action plans to take further actions to tackle corridor care and submit those action plans to NHS England regional teams. And I think there are about 30 trusts across the country considered to be in that space of particularly challenged from a corridor care perspective. And of course, as we know, we're one of those trusts. So having received that letter yesterday, David, I thought it'd be appropriate to mention that to board colleagues, and we'll provide the detail to our next cycle of quality and safety and finance and performance committees, and ensure that our regular reporting that we already do to board will be strengthened with reporting against that corridor care now that we have a national definition. So that's the first thing I wanted to update on. That's not in the board report. The second one is a separate matter. Late yesterday evening, I received correspondence from Unison. So I just wanted to make board members aware that that correspondence was the submission of a trade dispute letter from Unison, and that relates to clinical administration services and the potential for the Trust to give consideration to consultation to transform clinical administration services. We received that letter late yesterday. So David, subject to your agreement, I'd be intending that we share that letter with all board members later today to ensure that we can give their appropriate consideration to the matters of concern that are raised by our Unison colleagues. And then just to state that Royal Cornwall Hospitals NHS Trust remains committed to working in partnership with Unison and remains committed to working in partnership with all of our unions, particularly through a joint consultative negotiating committee in all of our endeavours, not just with regards to clinical administration, but in all other matters as well. So they were the two matters I thought I should brief that weren't reflected in the Chief Executive's report. In terms of the rest of the report, I'll take that as read. I would like, though, to congratulate our divisional leadership appointments, our clinical chairs, divisional directors and heads of nursing. So the report sets out the appointments that have been made in those posts in our medicine, surgery, women's and children's, clinical support and cancer divisions, and thank those colleagues and congratulate them for stepping into those roles. David's already mentioned the acting chief nurse officer arrangements. I'm delighted, Kim, with Bernie's appointment as interim chief nursing officer, and I'm sure all colleagues look forward to working with her in that interim role. If I could also draw board members' attention to the section of the report about robotic surgery. That's a fantastic move forward. £2 million of capital investment to support and enable robotic surgery to be delivered at Royal Cornwall hospitals. And if I could acknowledge Ella and the team for driving that, and James Clark and our team clinically, and all of our colleagues that have enabled that to happen. And we can expect robotic surgery to commence over the coming weeks as a really important development within Royal Cornwall hospitals. I would like to finish with one separate matter, David. Mary, our Chief Medical Officer, and I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time in our emergency department this morning at their regular Tackling Trauma meeting. And the reason I mention it is we heard a review of an extraordinary effort from colleagues within our organisation and across the system in response to a major road traffic incident on the 24th of February. That was a really serious road traffic incident that required multiple SWAT crews, multiple fire and rescue crews, Cornwall Air Ambulance, the deployment of Royal Cornwall Hospital's trauma response function, and resulted in 4 serious trauma cases being rapidly conveyed to the emergency department on that night at a time where the emergency department was under really very, very significant pressure. What we heard from Nick Crombie, the trauma and transfer consultant, from Joe Barham, who led the ED response, and all of our other colleagues, was really an extraordinary effort and response. And I think Mary and I both felt it was a privilege to be able to hear all of our colleagues within our organisation, the partners that we worked with, and our Radiology Peninsula Network colleagues who collectively took actions which undoubtedly saved the lives of at least 2 of those trauma patients. And I just wanted to pay testimony to what was an amazing response from an incredible team. And I thought it would be appropriate for Mary and I to reflect that, given that we were there this morning. Very happy to take any questions on the rest of the report. Over.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I think it's quite appropriate that you end your final public board report paying tribute to the extraordinary efforts and professionalism of our teams. Mary, is there anything you would like to add?
No, Steve said it already. It was both inspiring and humbling. Every element of the team, from the people on site all the way through to the people in the emergency department, people across the hospital that stepped in to help, the remote radiology support, Derriford, everybody, that it was seamless and everybody went above and beyond. And yet, as Steve said, lives were saved, and it was an absolutely awe-inspiring story to sit and listen. And the professionalism of the debrief as well, literally afterwards, going through it, trying to get the learning. I absolutely echo what Steve said.
Thank you, Mary. In relation to the letter from Unison, Steve and I discussed this last night, and my proposal would be that we table it this afternoon. We wouldn't normally have tabled papers, but there is a precedent when we had a previous letter from Unison, so that with the board's permission, we'll table it at the private board this afternoon. I'll give you time to read it, and then we can consider it alongside the paper that we have from the executive. Is the board content with that way forward? Okay, thank you very much then. So could we receive a note to Steve's report with the national policy updates, and take any questions and comments from members of the board? First of all, we've got Adrian Davis and then Richard. Adrian is a non-executive director.
Yes, thank you very much for your report, Steve. I just wanted to comment on corridor care. At both the Finance and Performance Committee and the Quality Assurance Committee last month, we did a deep dive on the integrated performance report and looked at corridor care and the impact of that for RCHT. And we've asked for some further information to be brought to future meetings. So I very much look forward to receiving that letter and any action plans that will result from that. We looked at it from a quality, a safety, a performance and a finance perspective in those different forums.
Could we move on now to Richard Kramer, please?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask a question around the leadership appointments, and just to hear a bit more from the perspective of those who are appointed and those who are not successful, what the interview process has felt like and how people have been supported, and is there any learning for future processes?
I might ask Robin, initially as Chief Operating Officer, to comment on that, if that's okay, Robin?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Richard. So colleagues that have been appointed have been very clear in anecdotal feedback to us that rigorous process, challenging process as you'd expect it to be, but felt fair process. And those appointed colleagues were also then, because of the way we structured the selection mechanism, were then part of selecting the next tiers in the organisation. So they then got to see the process from the other side of the table, which reaffirmed to them the parity that we'd worked to apply, the mechanisms and structures we'd put in place with regards to standardised questions, standardised scoring metrics, check and challenge at the end of those scoring sessions, and in some regards, some of the deliberations post interviews were an hour to 2 hours long, which you would expect when we're making very serious decisions about our organisation, about individuals. So positive feedback through that mechanism. Colleagues that have been unsuccessful is more of a mixed bag, as you would expect. Some colleagues have commented about how they've really valued the mechanism we've put in place, where if you've been unsuccessful, you get time with the independent company Theatons that are supporting us to get independent, personalised feedback from your interview about you as an individual. And they have said that whilst It's been difficult to not be successful, and it's been difficult to hear some of that messaging. They value the fact that it's been open and honest, and by using an independent person to do that, it's created a safe space which initiates an element of coaching through that conversation. I think, Richard, what will probably make the best way of answering that question in more detail is if I arrange for us to bring a summary to the next People and Culture Committee for scrutiny in that area, because I will be able to gather more information, which will be more than the anecdote of the people that have been talking to me.
It's okay. I think Kim wanted to add to that, David.
Yeah, I know we spoke about it in a previous meeting, but it's really important. So some of the feedback we've had, as Robin has said, especially with unsuccessful candidates, and that's always a huge disappointment, is they've really valued going back for that feedback, and that's enabled them to consider that what options they still have open. And one in particular that gave me some really, I think, humbling feedback is they were upset, disappointed, went and had their feedback. They've been able to work their way through that, and they've gone on to give a really good interview for a subsequent post, and they've been successful in that. So I think that's really important, and they've spoken about their experience to help others. So acknowledging there are still people in that post, we're really encouraging people, as though they're disappointed, to go and have that feedback, have an open door for any further people they need to see, and then go on to make a choice. So we're doing everything we can, but it's really powerful when it comes from one of their peers.
Yes, I know when I spoke to Bernie, she said that it helped reinforce that we had made the right decisions around the structures of the divisions, and that people felt, particularly those who hadn't been interviewed for a number of years, felt actually quite empowered by the whole process and felt a real sense, actually, this is really good for me and my development, my career. So I wanted to feed that positive feedback too.
Thank you. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Steve, for the report. Just a comment for board members and an update in terms of the pay award for Agenda for Change staff. So I think, firstly, it's really positive that that's been announced so rapidly. It's the first time in a number of years that will be paid to staff in their April pay packets, which we know is beneficial for staff across the organisation. You'll note that the 3.3% that's been approved is above the 2% that was in the planning guidance, but we have also had confirmation from NHS England nationally that contract values for each organisation will be uplifted to reflect that. So we're not expected to find that funding locally. There is a national uplift to cover that. So that's a really positive piece of news as well.
Thank you. And Alison Thorne-Henderson, who's our Chief People Officer. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to Steve's report at a time when there is significant world events happening around the Ramadan event that's happening on Sunday, the 8th of March. It's been communicated in our newsletter, but it is a fantastic opportunity for colleagues, no matter what faith or no faith, to join that event in Cornwall.
Thank you for raising that, Alison. But I know Uzma Bozai, had she been here, would have wanted to raise that point as well. Thank you. So I'm just looking around the room and looking at the screen to see if there's any other comments or questions. Are you all done? Okay, so in relation to the governance around this report, I think we do need to receive and note it, including the national policy updates. We should endorse the self-assessment undertaken against the NHS Code of Governance for NHS provider trusts as a compliant position. And we should note the self-assessment of the provider licence, which is our licence to practice, as it were, from the NHS, was a compliant position. And this would be updated at year end and presented to the Trust Board in June of this year. Any other points from anyone? If not, could I thank you very much, Steve? I will miss those reports.
Thank you.
That takes us on then to item 8, which is always a very important item near the top of our agenda, urgent and emergency care performance. And could I ask Robin Jones, Chief Operating Officer, to take us into this, please, Robin?
Thank you, Chair. I'll open with, I know the paper's read, but there is some repetition from the report we received in board in private, deliberately because we receive it at every board meeting, including the private boards, and I felt that some of that information needed to be for our public report as well. Just to note, and the linkage through Steve's report on the Mary, Kim, Steve, David and myself attended the National Summit for Ending Corridor Care last week. Steve's provided some details in the appendices of his paper as well. And as Adrian alluded to from Quality Assurance Committee and Finance and Performance Committee, we have discussed our corridor care in detail, and it ties through to our urgent and emergency care response in that there are national guides coming out, one of which has come from an organisation called GIRF, Getting It Right First Time, which sets out a nationally expected set of operational standards. We've taken that guidance, and tomorrow will be our first go at testing how we're delivering against that guidance. And the ability to test and understand the delivery is something that many trusts are grappling with. And we've been sharing some of our thoughts into some of the regional forums that we're part of so that we can all work through how we can turn that guidance to life and make it deliver for us. We have also taken, and again, it's in Steve's papers, but there's a 12-point suggested action plan. We've taken that suggested action plan and started to align our actions against that plan so that our clinical vision of flow actions that we've already got in place all tie together as part of our commitment to ending corridor care. And the really positive piece is just before that summit, we had our monthly clinical vision of flow board where we set out our ambition in draft for a 3-stepped approach across the year to moving away from our corridor care, improving our ambulance handovers further, and ending the delays in the emergency department. And it was our clinical leaders that challenged us that wasn't ambitious enough and moved some of the actions for end of Q1 into end of month 1 space. And to link through to Adrian's point, that team are now pulling together the final action plan for that. So it's not an exec action plan, it is the team's action plan. And it's important it's that way round, that it's theirs for us to support, for them to deliver and them to own. And we are intending that action plan will be ready for sharing to the committees. I will make sure it's shared to colleagues at the earliest opportunity so that you can see what milestones we're setting and the bespoke actions we're taking in our commitments to ending corridor care, which by doing so will result in improvements in other elements of the urgent care position. And in particular, a graph for colleagues to watch out for will be on the top of page 6 of the report, which is our aggregated patient delay. And I showed in the February board, but again here I've just taken it back to November last year, and you can see we had a peak of aggregated patient delay towards the end of January, and through February that's been reducing. That's an important graph because when the rolling 30-day average drops below 9,000 hours, that takes our ED crowding risk from a score 25, the highest risk we have in our organisation, to a score 20. A score 20 is still an extreme risk, but it starts to demonstrate our movement on that risk mitigation. What I'd also just draw colleagues' attention to, again, I know the report's read, but I've taken some of the graphs that are already in the integrated performance report just to enable you to see some of the trends over time from our average ambulance handovers and our 4-hour performance. January was particularly challenged for us, but you can see a general still improving trend as we continue our efforts, continue the delivery of our clinical vision of flow. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Robin. Comments or questions, discussion? John Foster, Associate, Next Director.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Really helpful report. As ever, I just wanted to I suppose, share a quick comment and a question off the back of it. I was really lucky to have the opportunity to spend some time obviously with yourself and Liz, your deputy, meeting some colleagues across the emergency department, acute medical unit and the same day assessment space, as well as MRATs last week. But one thing that really stood out from that was I was privileged, I think, to be witness to a conversation between the unit manager of AMU, one of the consultants, yourself and Liz. And the unit manager was raising I think at its core, a challenge, but also a solution and an ask for how they wanted to improve the flow, change how their unit was able to work and contribute to the good running of that sort of front door of the hospital. And I really just wanted to reflect how impressed I was to see not just that unit manager raise that, but the response from the four of you then to spend, I think, a good half an hour stood in the corridor trying to work out how you could change that, how you could improve it, how you could deliver something on that. And I thought culturally that was exactly the behaviour we need to see more of. It's exactly the behaviour I think that will help us to move this forward. And particularly pleasing to hear that attempt was in many respects successful, and you've been able to build on that improvement, and obviously a way to go, but a small step. So I suppose my question in that, as well as a thanks and well done, because that was really good to see, is how can we see a bit more of that? How can we encourage more of that behaviour, more of that culture of problem solving there and then, and people feeling empowered to raise those points?
Thank you, John. Yes, it was a lovely conversation. So it was our unit leader, Nina, and Dr. Katie Wallace, one of the acute medical consultants, who took the opportunity when they saw us in the corridor to say they've been talking around the need to make our medical rapid assessment and triage suite MRATs flow better and faster, and how they believe, and I agree with them, how they believe that getting that MRATs flowing is a key component to our ending of corridor care. And their suggestion was if we could keep one bay clear on MRATs for Sunday night rolling into Monday morning, that would enable MRATs to function as MRATs should, so that we would see an improvement in our emergency department by effectively not having a medical take in the department. And we were able to do that through the conversation that you heard, and engagement with Katie talking to her colleagues as well to say, look, this is why, this is the how and the why. We've then been able to see that that's trickled down in some other colleagues coming with some further suggestions, which is why for the last 2 nights we have been successful in keeping 4 of our TES areas in medicine empty overnight. Now, to achieve ending of corridor care, colleagues, we need to not use our TES spaces at all, but this is about a journey. To instill, I think for me, to instill that is how we harness the new divisional structure that we've put in place, and the spirit of how we put that in place, because we have been saying clearly to those appointed colleagues that this is our time to make sure we deliver on our promise to them, to give them freedom to act. So for me, it's our opportunity to celebrate where they are saying, I'd like to try this, I would like to move X forwards, I want to take this methodology and try it in my area. Our function is to say, do you need any support from us? We don't always, but if you do, can I support you? And when you've done it, let's go and say thank you. And actually, at the beginning of this week, I met with one of Ella's team linking through to the culture work, and we were talking about how we can use the new divisional structure and the work that's coming through the culture programme to really get focus into our, it's not about grade, but really try and focus into our band 5, band 6, band 7 colleagues on the QI methodology, and that linkage that as you learn this, our changes from our behaviour set through the divisional change will mean that you can apply that methodology locally and make those changes. Because we need our strategic change, which I talked about at the beginning of this section, but actually we need our army of change agents to be doing what you witnessed in the corridor, saying, well, actually, if we did this and this, it would make that happen. And I think the combined work with Zoe and Ella's team will help us move in that direction.
Thank you for the question, John. Richard.
Yeah, was glad to listen to that exchange, and thanks, John, for raising the question, because it shows to me that, and hearing the example earlier, our staff work incredibly hard in the most difficult circumstances, and staff, like patients, don't want corridor care treatment. It's hugely distressing and unrelenting for them, but if people feel they can empowered to come up with solutions, that really does give everybody hope. And I know that we're doing everything we can to support patients and improve the system. So the two questions I wanted to ask was, it's great that we've got some peer review with Chelsea and Westminster. I think that can only be a positive thing. I just wanted to be assured that they're looking not just at flow within the system, but looking at effective discharge as well, efficient discharge. And secondly, we can see that 1 in 5 patients are waiting for 12 hours or more. We also talked about eradicating 24-hour care. So I just wanted to get a sense of how many and what percentage of people are waiting for 24 hours or more, and whether we can report on that moving forward. So hopefully we can show the trend to zero on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So, yes, we were very privileged to have Dr. Gary Davies, the Deputy Medical Director from Chelsea and Westminster, spend the first half of this week with us. And that's a supportive, that was our ask from Chelsea to come and spend some time with us. And in fact, some of our colleagues are going to go and spend some time at Chelsea in that shared learning space. And the reason for that is Chelsea have been in a similar place to us and have made changes to influence the improvement. And there is something about your point exactly, when people are working so hard and running so fast, can't always see the solution. So having somebody who's been in that space to say, look, honestly, you move from here to here, the world opens up for you, is powerful. We asked Gary in the main to focus with us on our actions and our opportunities. And we're very clear of we need to focus, and I say we need to focus 95% of our time on what can we influence and make sure we get right. And we should only really focus 5% of our time on our system partners' actions. That said, our system partners are making commitments in the spirit of we've got timely handover protocol at the front door from ambulance into us, and our system partners are making commitments to move towards timely handover protocols for exit from us. In the same spirit of it's taken us a long time to make the improvements we've made because they're difficult challenges, and we haven't fully landed that, as we can see openly in the report presented today. Our partners are making the commitments that they want to get to that level of churn. That will make a material improvement for us. We've been working through the clinical reference group to reset the system, the core pillars of work that will realign to that timely handover protocol. To answer your question directly in regards to did Gary support us on how we might do more with our system partners, he walked us through a mechanism that they're rolling out in London for reason not to admit. Now, we do a reason not to admit audit, but there are some ways that we can change that current audit, which works with our partners on, actually, this is their patients where if they hadn't arrived, we wouldn't have admitted in the first instance, and we admitted them because this was the only option we had at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that system learning. So picking up the methodology that Gary used, really, really helpful. Our teams also were privileged to join Chelsea's long length of stay review meeting, and how that achieves the balance of internal actions and how it links through to our system partners. And again, we have that infrastructure and our system partners working with it, but it's an opportunity to see, can we make adjustments to that infrastructure to make more of an impact? And yes, we do check every single day. We have a huddle with our CFT partners chaired by either Steve or CFT's chief executive. And one of the indicators that we track are number of patients in the emergency department over 24 hours, regardless of presentation reason. So we can track that, and it would be, I could bring it through the report I take to Quality Assurance Committee of what that looks like.
Did I see your hand up, Ian, or was I dreaming?
Yeah, no, you did. Richard's covered part of it. So I think for me, there's something about, we talk about percentages sometimes in this report, and I think making that into patients, so as you alluded to, 1 in 5 patients is waiting over 12 hours in our emergency department. That's not something any of us would want to accept. And it was just to comment on the fact, I think the clinical vision of flow work that Robin's leading is key to this. So when we talk about corridor care, it's not, we can't fix one part of the jigsaw. This is a complex ecosystem. And I think having it through that, and this report, I think is starting to give us really good insight at board in terms of the complexity and the kind of the nature of how those metrics interact.
Any other contributions? Aled Jones, Associate Non-Executive Director.
Thank you. I think the report and the graphs give me kind of assurance around some of the resilience in the system as well. So when we have sudden kind of abrupt shocks to the system, like January clearly was, so what we see kind of from the end of January into February and pre-January is a more stable system. So yeah, there's obvious disruption and shock in the system. But I think one of the tests is how quickly do we revert back to where we were before in terms of mediums and norms. And that picture seems to be heading back in the right direction, as it were. So massive peak in January in terms of things like aggregated delay, which is now recovering. Is that how it feels like? So we've got the in the moment sort of decision makings that John was talking about in the corridor, problem solving on the hoof, which is fantastic. I'm thinking about assurance around what's the longer term learning in terms of this? What's the wash up of January as a whole in terms of learning? Was it predictable? When people talk about winter pressures, this looks like what that should look like in a way, but do we understand what that was? Is our resilience as good as it kind of looks here, do you think?
Brilliant question, Aled. One of the things we have been recognised for, externally and internally, is we are now able to have an impact and have a recovery from, as you describe, a shock. And that's why our average ambulance handovers, whilst not where we wanted them to be for January, are improved from January 25. So I would say we're halfway on the journey to resolving that. So we've made the improvements, but not quite enough. So you're right to reference through winter pressures. Was it predictable? Yes. Did we have a plan? Yes. Did that plan make improvements? Yes. Did that plan make enough improvements? No. So there is definitely learning in that plan to say where were opportunities to do more. But I believe that as an organisation, we responded to what we could see coming in January and had a positive impact. Another element that we are actively doing is celebrating in our site safety meetings when we are achieving the recovery. So we will say, this time last week, we came in this morning to X, Y, and Z, which none of us want. This morning, we've come into those things aren't happening. That is well done. That is your work. You should be very proud of yourselves for that. Because for me, you can't beat the impact of a positive momentum. So as colleagues are seeing that was a really tough day yesterday and we did X, Y, and Z, but actually I've come in this morning and it has had that impact. Whilst still our organisation is under pressure, we're open about we're still over-escalated, but colleagues seeing that impact, I think is key critical. What doesn't help with our shocks is we're over capacity. And it's why the NHS sets the standard as to operate at 92% capacity, so you've got that wiggle room for those shocks. Our real challenge is we're beyond 92% capacity and we've got all of our surge capacity in use. So when we get a shock, it causes more of a distinct action, as you can see on the aggregated patient delay.
Any other comments? So, what do we take out of this report, Steve? The Corridor Care Summit was on a Chatham House basis, so I can't attribute anything, but I think it was interesting, at least on the table that I was on, with lots of different people from different trusts, that we're all in the same boat, as it were, all facing the same challenges. But there was a lot of interest in our clinical vision of flow, and that we actually have a plan. If you look at the data from this time last year and now, we've definitely made significant progress in ambulance handovers, in decisions on admission to the hospital or discharge. But clearly we've still got log jams and we've still got more to do. But apart from the extraordinary pressures we sometimes have, in January and February, for example, you do see a pattern in the data of progress, and there's further plans to continue that progress and move towards ending corridor care. And the point you just made, Robin, I think is very important, because the NHS in England does run red hot. So there's very little headroom and capacity. If we were sitting in France or Germany our hospital would be 70 to 80% full. I don't know what it is today, but it's probably something like 95, 96, 97%. So when you've got very little headroom, clearly the pressures are more acute. But nevertheless, we are making progress. We're working very well with our community partners, and we've got a plan, and we'll keep monitoring it and supporting the staff who are delivering the plan. Stephen.
Well, I was just going to make two comments. One, you're absolutely right about the occupancy level being around 96%, but actually that's an artificially low figure because that includes the use of any surge spaces that we have in operation. And if they weren't included, occupancy would be significantly higher than 100%. I just was wondering, as we're having this discussion, whether it would be appropriate for the board to require the updated action plan to come back to board in public so we can be transparently assured of the steps and actions that Robin's outlined. There is a huge amount of work which has been underway. As Robin said, the existing really comprehensive plan we had developed with our clinical and operational teams across the organisation has been further tested and refined against the national guidance that we saw just a few days ago. It will be further tested with the feedback from our medical director colleague from Chelsea and Westminster, which gives us an opportunity to strengthen the plan further. And Robin, whether you'd be content for that plan to come to the next board in public, so we can have that. And as part of that, start to see the corridor care reporting to the board in public. And I think the challenge from Richard about over 24-hour ED stay is a really important one, so we can build all of those aspects into our future reporting to board in private and board in public as well.
Good to hear about that, Robin.
Very happy with that, yes.
So I can see lots of nodding. I'm just looking at Kim as well.
Thank
And
you.
so that's what we'll do. And this urgent and emergency care report will enrich and develop as the corridor care and the mapping with the getting it right first time practice and the clinical vision of flow develops. Okay, so could we note the update, just checking if there are any other contributions? Could we note that update then, please, and note the report with the addition of Steve's suggestion that we bring back the corridor care progress in public at each public board meeting as part of your overall report, Robin. And thank you very much to you and colleagues for everything you've been doing. So that takes us into section B, reports and matters from committees. The first one is item 9, the Guardian of Safe Working Hours Q3 report. Sarah Coulter, who is the Guardian of Safe Working Hours, is unable to be with us today, but she's hoping to be with us at the next public board. In the meantime, could I just ask Mary Kane, our Chief Medical Officer, is there anything you'd like to mention about this report, Mary?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. Yeah, unfortunately, Sarah was unavoidably pulled into clinical activity, which obviously takes precedent. So the report demonstrates that our resident doctors do continue to exception report, and I think that's important that a lot of work is put in to make sure that they feel empowered to do that. And Sarah and the team manage the exception reports very, very swiftly. We have seen potentially slightly fewer, but largely a similar number of reports coming in over the last quarter. Following straight on from Robin, our Chief Operating Officer's report, it's unsurprising that the bulk are in medicine, which is obviously a specialty that is under considerable operational pressures. Quarter of those are in respiratory medicine, which is actually our Guardian of Safe Working Hours' own specialty. We've looked at how we can buck that trend and better support those doctors. Most of them are about having to work additional hours. And we have managed to expedite some changes to the ward support that were going to come in August that we've managed to bring forward to April that will allow an additional 2 members of staff per shift, medical staff per shift on the respiratory team's roster, which should significantly improve that situation. Cardiology have also done some work over the last quarter to improve their level of support for their doctors, which has started to see an improvement. So we are heeding what we are receiving in terms of exception reports and acting, and we hope to see those changes come to fruition. I think the other thing to note is that there have been some national changes to the exception reporting process, which are only being implemented last month and now, so we can't report on the output of those improvements, but there have been a number of improvements made that are listed within section 3 of the report. The aim being to streamline the exception reporting process, remove stages that don't appear to add value, to believe and trust, not that we didn't believe and trust in our junior doctors exception reporting process, but to make it feel like a much more credible process to those doctors, and to ensure that the turnaround times for responses are good. So they are all in process now, significantly supported by Lawrence, our DME, and his team, and Sarah will report more fully in the next quarter's report as to how these changes have been embedded and any changes that we are seeing as a result of them.
Thank you, Mary. You've highlighted just the issues I think the board would have wanted to highlight. Could I just check with you? The report talks about an imminent solution to the rest facilities in Trelawney. Is there any more to say on that?
An area has been found and judged to be appropriate. So estates have worked hard with our ex-chief resident, and I'm delighted to report that we have now appointed her successor, but our ex-chief resident has continued, even though she's not actually currently working here, has continued to support the process to make sure a smooth handover. An outpatient department area has been identified as appropriate, and that's being acted upon. So yeah, there's been significant movement there.
Just for members of the public, there's a 10-point plan for
There is a 10-point
resident
plan
doctors
that we are
to try and improve their conditions, and this is part of it. But also, we want to think about the conditions of all staff, not just resident doctors.
We're doing well against that 10-point plan. And as you say, it's not just about the doctors, it's about all staff. So where there are changes that we can implement that will improve the lives of a number of professional groups, we will clearly do that. It's not just about the medical team. We are achieving well against our 10-point plan. And our chief resident our outgoing chief resident has handed over to our new chief resident to ensure that we continue that trajectory, but also that we're looking to be a bit more value added. So making sure that the 10-point plan that is a nationally agreed plan is fit for purpose here, and that if there are priorities for our team of resident doctors that don't necessarily fall within that 10-point plan, we're addressing those as well.
It's all part of our resident doctors and all our staff feeling valued and supported. Aled.
Sorry, no, I've got my hand.
Sorry, did you have your hand?
Is it still up?
Did you have your hand up? No, okay, thank you. Adam.
Yeah, thank you for the paper. Just one question on the area you mentioned, Mary, about area of concern within the respiratory team. And I just wondered, the way the report's written suggests we've known about the problem for 10 months. And with hindsight, are there any lessons we could learn about whether we could have done anything quicker to address the issue?
We have been trying to address the issue for that period of time. And as I say, we've been able to bring a solution forward that was initially felt to only be possible in August to April, largely by agreement with individuals, because obviously doctors who have rotating posts, for instance, have an expectation. So we need to make sure it meets their training needs as well. So we've worked quite closely with the resident doctors to come up with that solution. I think the problem is not solely down to, but was partially down to the ward designations and changes for the respiratory and cardiology teams. And I guess with hindsight, we may have been able to predict that there was a potential problem on the horizon, but actually I don't think we fully understood what it would look like, because we needed to understand how the new reconfiguration would be translated into how the teams worked within that new space. Once we understood how the teams were working within that new space, they probably became a bit more manifest and easy to articulate, which meant we could work on the solution. So there is an element of, yes, we could have potentially foreseen it, but it was very difficult to predict until we saw it in practice, because the teams were occupying a similar space but working in a different way. So yes, learning, but I don't know that, I think hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on this, please? Okay, so thank you very much, Mary, for standing in, and thank you for the report. If we could move on to item 10, the Quality Assurance Committee report to the board. Just by way of explanation to those who are watching online, we have a network of committees, for example, on quality and safety, finance and performance, people and culture, audit and risk. And the committees are the engine room of the board and do all the hard work to advise us. And so we tend to trust those committees and their work, and their chairs bring items which need to be escalated to the board. But I just want to make it clear to observers that any member of the board is very welcome to check or challenge any aspect of a committee's work, whether it's been escalated or not. So against that background, Adrian Davis is a member of the Quality Assurance Committee. And Adrian, I think, and I hope you're prepared to introduce this on behalf of the chair.
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm going to take the report as read. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but there are a couple of issues that I wish to bring to your attention. There were no matters referred for decision from the Quality Assurance Committee to the board, but a couple of items to escalate. The first of which we've already talked about at length, which is UEC performance. And again, we did that deep dive, but we'd identified that during January, the trust had escalated to internal critical incident twice, but we noted the speed at which we were able to get out of that critical incident and the indication of the good work that we've done and hopefully will continue to do with regard to the clinical vision of flow. The second issue that I wanted to bring to the board's is the trust investigation into a couple of health and safety matters. We had one in the January meeting and one in the February meeting, and the committee have asked to have oversight of assurance on the outcome and actions that come from those investigations. So those were the two items that I wanted to bring to the committee's to the board's attention, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I think you're off the hook, Adrian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So could we receive and note the Quality Assurance Committee Assurance Report from its January and February meetings, please? Thank you. And then we can move on to item 10.1, which I really enjoyed reading. Really good report on antimicrobial resistance. I remember sitting next to Dame Sally Davis at a dinner many years ago, and this is what she wanted to talk about, this really important issue globally of antimicrobial resistance to antibiotics. So we've got, I think, Ian Davidson, Chief Pharmacist, with us.
We do, yes. Hi there.
Hello, Ian. It's good to see you again. And thank you for taking me around the pharmacy last week. And have we got Joe Turner?
Just invite her in, Reid. We're ahead of schedule, Chair, so therefore.
I was waiting for you to compliment me, but I know I'll wait a long time. So we've got Ian Davidson, Chief Pharmacist, and we're just inviting Joe Turner in as well. In the meantime, Mary, would you like to take us into this report?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will leave Ian and Joe to present the highlights of the report and answer questions. But I think what I would like to say as an overarching statement is that RCHT's performance on antimicrobial resistance is in many respects exemplar, and we are already achieving at or close to the target in several areas, and that's thanks to preemptive and really focused work by Ian and his team. So we clearly will seek to do more, and Ian will set that out, and we have some targets that I have no doubt we will meet, but we are starting from a really strong position because this has been on our radar for a significant period of time before it has been raised upon the national agenda. But I will, at this stage, leave Ian to present what he feels are the key points.
Thank you, Mary. Ian?
Thank you, and thanks, Mary. Yes, and as you say, David, Sally Davis really kicked this off some years back with her strategy just to raise what a global risk this was to healthcare. And I think it's fair to say that the pandemic sort of derailed that, and the letter that's come from NHS England around Act Now, protect our present, secure our future, is very much a reset, and I think just a reminder to trust that they really need to refocus on this matter and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. So with that in mind, we are asked in that letter to set out 3 priorities as a trust as what we would like to focus on to support the national strategy, and we need to publish those priorities as well. So that's essentially what is set out in the report. As Mary has kindly alluded to, we've got a really strong antimicrobial stewardship team led by a consultant pharmacist, Neil Powell, and also very strong leadership from Joe Taylor from the infection control element as well. We're doing well on our consumption. We're doing well on the sort of watch and reserve, the high risk antibiotics, but things are going in an upwards trajectory at the moment. So even though we are below average on a lot of that, we are seeing it creeping up. So there is still work to be done, and we're very keen to tackle that work. The priorities that we have set out is the first one is the biggie around overall consumption, so reducing how much we use in there, and we're very keen to increase our presence clinically on the wards with more antimicrobial stewardship rounds, and including paediatrics as well, which is often an area that is overlooked, and then introducing some ARC audits, which is in there. So that's where when clinicians think that there's an infection, actually giving an idea of the diagnostic certainty of that, because there's reticence from the next clinician that comes along to stop antibiotics. But the evidence shows that actually if the first diagnosis was only a possible or a probable, then the next person coming along is more likely to stop it and rethink. So we're very keen to get that back implemented within the trust. So that's our first priority, is around antibiotic consumption. Our second one is around increasing the use of access antibiotics. So that's those are the antibiotics that are low risk of causing resistance. We're already meeting the target of 70% there, but we can do more. Neil's PhD was all around delabeling of penicillin allergic patients. So about 6% of the general population have a penicillin allergy against their health record. But actually 90% of those don't have a penicillin allergy. It's just, they had a rash when they were small and told they might have a pen allergy. So we've been doing a lot of work, which Neil has been leading, and is now a sort of global piece of work as well around actually bringing those patients in, identifying those patients either when they're inpatients or outpatients, and then taking them through a safety checklist, and then we give them a challenge of an oral penicillin. We monitor them, we follow them up, and I think just about all of them have been delabeled from a penicillin allergy. And that's huge, because then that means there's a whole, a much bigger range of antibiotics that we can use on these patients when they come in. So we're really keen to continue that, but also to get properly commissioned outpatient service that GPs and primary care can refer patients into. We did it as a pilot, it worked really well, but we're keen to get that, as a formally commissioned service within Cornwall. And NHS England have picked up on this work and are looking to commission this kind of stuff nationally as well. And then our third priority is really about the prevention of infection in the first place, and that's around our vaccination programme. We had a strong vaccination programme during the pandemic, and we've been lucky enough to maintain a sort of core nucleus of that team into these years, and we continue to provide COVID and flu and other RSV and other vaccinations as an outreach service. We're just bidding for the outreach contract that will take us into the next 5 years, which will very much focus around health inequalities with vaccination. And we're really keen for the Trust to continue to support that outreach work into our communities. So those are our 3 priorities, and I recommend those to the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. And we're in public, as you know, so I think it's very helpful that those messages can be going out to the public and to the primary care community. Jo, is there anything you want to add from an infection control point of view?
Thank you. Yes. So the part of the letter that asked was that we did an assessment against the infection control board assurance framework. And the board assurance framework was a document that was developed again during the COVID pandemic to give governance to organisations around the structures and the processes you should have in place. But post COVID-19, it was developed very much based on the criterion that is set out in the hygiene code. Now, the hygiene code is something that as an organisation we have assessed ourselves against for a number of years, and therefore we had already been doing that piece of work. It's 10 main criteria broken down into 74 subcategories, and I'm pleased to say we are compliant, and from the 74 we have an action plan only for 4 of those that are outstanding, which are things that there is work ongoing to address. So the part that we were asked to do from the infection control element of that again has been completed. That gets done periodically and is reported through the infection control committee and monitored through that means as well.
Thank you, Jo. If you don't mind staying for a few minutes, I'm just going to ask the questions and comments from the board. First of all, I think we've got Ian Dean. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Ian and Jo, for the work on this really good paper, and really good to highlight how well we're doing in this area, and raise the awareness, as you say, publicly as well, Chair. My question was just, the letter asks us to set out timelines as part of it, and in the table of priority 1, I think it could be stronger if when we talk about how we plan to achieve this, we could just have some reference to when we expect to be able to either roll those things out or to be able to measure some of the demonstrable progress in terms of the specific objectives. So it was just a bit of, it could be slightly strengthened, I think, in terms of that ask in the letter around timelines, possibly.
Any other comments or questions? John.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. It was really good to receive this at Quality Committee as well a couple of weeks ago, and just wanted to reflect back for the wider board and those watching the discussion we had around, although it's excellent news that we consistently are sort of finishing sort of top quartile for COVID and flu vaccination, the importance of looking at that through a health inequalities lens. And I think the committee, we were really pleased to hear about all the excellent work you've been doing around that through partnership with public health teams and others. But just, we had a good discussion about the importance of getting that really baked into how we're working around the vaccination programme going forward, and as we see that shift into community for us as an acute trust as well. So if there was anything you wanted to add to that discussion, but thank you again for the comments last week.
Thank you, John. Ella?
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Ian and Jo. I think as well, I'd just like to pull out that example you gave around the delabelling of penicillin. For me, really brought to life the importance of when we say in our strategic approach to the trust why innovation is important and why an innovative mindset amongst staff is important. And I think your team are really exemplary in that, actually, coming at these kind of global problems and saying, what can we contribute to that? How might we do things differently? And how might we prove new concepts? It's really quite inspiring. So really lovely to see that brought to life.
Thank you.
Ella Stracey is our Chief Strategy Officer. And of course, this is exactly what a university hospital should be doing. Steve.
Well, it's on the same point about the penicillin matter. Really helpful to hear about that innovation and that work that's underway, which I think is kind of regional and national leading in some respects. My question is there anything more we should consider in terms of wider public communications to help all of our communities understand the importance of this? I know there is some work in that already, but just to ask you, is there anything more you think the board or a wider system can do in terms of helping to inform members of the public?
Thanks, Steve. I think once once we've got a firmer footing with a service that we can offer that's outward facing rather than just for inpatients, and I think we really can start to communicate that out to the public and get people proactively referring themselves in for this kind of work. It's a simple process to go through, and at the moment it's penicillin only, but we're doing work around sort of delabeling of other allergies as well when it comes to antibiotics. So there is more to be done here as well, but I'm really keen for that, for the service to be set up on a firm footing, and then the GPs are really keen to start referring patients in.
Apologies to I just think that connection with GPs seems really important. We know we've got a network of 16 integrated neighbourhood teams bringing together not just GPs and primary care, but other aspects of the health and care system. Whether we can weave this into a discussion with our wider system partners about what else can be done to help support raising awareness.
Thank you, Steve. It's a very good suggestion. Ian and Joe, you may not know, Steve and I do a podcast after each board meeting or each public board meeting when we just talk generally and answer questions about the board's discussions. So I think, Steve, this might be quite a good item for us to pick up on the podcast next Tuesday.
That's really helpful. And I think Joe wanted to comment as well, David.
Yeah, just that both Neil, representing obviously the pharmacy department, and myself both sit on a system-wide antimicrobial group where we have shared a lot of this work and discussed the delabelling. And as you say, there is already a lot of interest to support taking that forward. And I sit on a system-wide infection control group, and again, with council partners and ICB. And again, there has already been some of that groundwork and discussion around the sort of desire to take that work forward. So it would be really good to see that the finances are there and the support to be able to do that system wide.
Joe. Any other questions or comments, Mary?
I was just going to make a really quick comment, and I think the conversation has clearly drawn out how well RCHT is doing in this respect. But I know it's a public board and not everybody maybe has had time to scrutinise the papers. Normally when we're talking about doing well, we're talking about being in the top quartile, the top decile, above average. And I know when Ian was describing it, he mentioned a couple of times that we're below average. That's good. And I just wanted to emphasise that because it's about we're below average. We're using less antibiotics, so I just wanted to draw that out just to make sure there was no confusion.
Yes, very good point. Thank you. It's not often it's good to be below average, but resistance as well. Ian, this may be an unfair question, and Joe, because you may not know, but another important issue, because we're only one part of a huge global ecosystem, is animal husbandry and the use of antibiotics. Is there any comment you could make on that, about whether there's anything happening in that area? That's fine.
I am part of sort of looking at sustainability, and I know I've done a little bit of that that Ella and Steve are aware of in the past. Part of that again is around antimicrobials and around the whole One Health system. And again, Neil has also done some of that work. So we work really closely with partners from across different organisations, and they do sit within. We do have veterinary sitting within the antimicrobial system-wide group to make sure that we look at it as a whole issue of antimicrobial use.
Good, because it's important that animals aren't pumped full of antibiotics for no good reason if we're doing our best to reduce it. So if there are no other comments, can we... Was there one other?
Ian might have had a comment.
Oh, sorry, Ian, did you want to come back in?
I was really just to add to Joe's that we're very linked in with the vets. We've that is where the majority of antibiotics are used globally is within the food industry and veterinary. So we are linked in with that. We've done a lot of work that we have run conferences at Eden and stuff around that, and the European Centre for Environment and Health. We were very linked in with them about finding Prozac in cabbages and all that, all the sort of how antibiotics and medicines more generally leak out into the environment. We've done work with Surfers Against Sewage. And we had the Beach Bums project where we were testing for antibiotics in sewage water. So there's loads of really good research opportunities with the environmental impact of medicines, not just antibiotics but medicines in there. We've got some really good links into the universities there, so we would be really keen to continue that. We run, again, Neil and Dan run an annual conference each year in Cornwall, which is very much a One Health lens on it, so not just about health but also about use in the wider environment. So from a research perspective, we'd be really keen to continue to to follow that thread.
Great, thank you. Well, there's messages for the veterinary community and the water industry as well as the primary care and the general public. So I'd like to move on, if that's okay. I think what we need to do in terms of our recording is, first of all, to receive the report with sincere thanks. Note the work supporting the antimicrobial resistance priorities, total antibiotic consumption being reduced, the antibiotic percentage consumption ratio through penicillin allergy delabeling, and the comprehensive vaccination programme. There's also the point about messages to the public and to the veterinary, primary care and other communities, because this is a global effort, and the research and dissemination opportunities as well. And also, of course, the risk to the delivery of the priorities and mitigations through workforce and e-care. Is that okay? Good. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ian, and thank you, Joe, for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on then to item 10.2, maternity and perinatal safety report and CNST declaration. Kim.
Thank you. So I'll keep this short and sweet because it's comprehensively discussed at our Quality Assurance Committee. But for those board members and the public that aren't at that meeting, the main points I'd like to highlight is the Maternity Incentive Scheme Year 7 has now been signed off both by ourselves, the local maternity system group, as well as my equivalent in the ICB, and that has been submitted. The business case that's associated with that has gone to double lock, and that has been signed off and is now being enacted accordingly as regards the recruitment asks. Really important from a national perspective is to note one of the appendix is looking at the actions we took to strengthen our scrutiny of one-to-one care in labour, and you'll see that coming up through the improvement plan, as well as noting our gap analysis that we undertook as regards our actions in relation to the recent National Home Birth Prevention of Future Death report. And it's really important to note that we have one integrated maternity improvement plan to make sure we encompass all of the actions and keep them all together. So those will form part of that as well. We'd like to welcome our new matron for the neonatal unit, and she is having a fresh eyes review as regards our staffing, our qualified in specialty, as well as of some of our ways of working. And we look forward to that coming through to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maximise our safety of families, but most importantly, best use of our staffing, skill mix and our future training, noting this has been a huge problem area nationally to recruit to. And I'll leave it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Comments, questions for Kim? Ian?
Yeah, just one. Thank you, Kim. The patient safety incident and on page 4 and 5 of the report, it talks about some of the reflections and learnings. It felt like a number of those would benefit from a checklist type approach. So it was just understanding, I think that is in use in maternity, but just to clarify, because it feels like that would be a good way of making sure some of those checks that feel like fairly straightforward things, but to make sure they're not missed in future.
No, you're right. And they're having a look and reviewing, as you heard in the board story, what can we do that forms that real live checklist, and are we doing it? And it's closely linked to the cultural work that they're doing as well, because you can have a checklist, but do you have the behaviours and the supportive culture that enable you to be able to complete that checklist? So that's, yeah, you're right, Ian, that's how we'll take that forward.
Yeah, no, thank you. Kim, for the report. I just wanted to say how positive it was to be accepted as part of the compass, the cultural work. And if there's any learning from that, perhaps we can apply that more widely. Perhaps that could be considered down the line. Thank you. And the second thing, sort of picking up about this equalities dashboard, again, could we capture that for when we complete our new equality delivery system report for next year? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Alison. Anything more? Okay. I noticed, Lindsay, on this report and the next one, there's an awful lot of things to be noted. The well-led review said that perhaps we did a bit too much noting. I wonder if it'd be possible just for us to say we note the whole report rather than every particular item. Maybe that's something that could be considered. So thank you for that, Kim. That takes us on to item 10.3, the safer staffing biannual report. Kim?
Thank you. And Chair, we have taken note. This is a huge report, and it comes up with quite a few notes. So we'll have a look in future how we can condense those. And I've probably done it in my key points. So we'll take that forward as learning as well. Thank you. So this is, remember, this is a board responsibility. While sitting with the Chief Nursing Officer as an integrated board, we have to make sure we're assuring ourselves that we are compliant with the National Quality Board guidance, and we have followed our board responsibilities and we've discharged them accordingly. So whilst this is quite a comprehensive report, I will look with Bernie, as she will be covering my role interim, how we do a little bit of a more concise prose at the front, because I appreciate a lot of this is quite technical as well. So we'll look at that going forward. So with that in mind, we continue to work closely with Ian and our finance colleagues in relation to unfunded beds on Trauma, Phoenix and Xena ward, as we fully realise as a board, and it's been raised in previous reports, that some of the beds that are open on these units are not what I would call core substantive beds. It's important to note they are in spaces with a headboard, have all the functions, but they were part of our escalation plans. So we will continue to work closely on that. Our workforce transformation is an absolute key critical part of how we continue to look at using our resources wisely. And we've focused on medicine and cardiology, and that has been reported in previous reports and is going through Quality Assurance Committee. All of these plans have the equivalent of our EQIAs, which is our quality impact assessments, and they are also part of the divisional now CIP plans. But most importantly, these aren't just numbers, they're skill mixing, competencies, and working in different ways. And that's part of our 26-27 CIP plans, but more importantly, it's supporting our career pathways, and we'll start to hear more about that as we go further through the year. Our main risk area, as you know, is the neonatal area. And we've just covered those in the previous report. And we continue to work closely with our urgent and emergency care pathway, the new clinical model, and some of the changes in our skill mixing. And that's where we'll continue to do that work currently. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any comments, discussion? Alison.
Yeah, so I suppose two questions, Kim. On one of the incidents involving a patient with learning disabilities, given that our Oliver McGowan compliance rate is at 34%, and although the highest in the southwest, but clearly a long way to go in terms of achieving a higher compliance rate, has that training sort of been reviewed in that particular area to say, is there a need to ensure that that particular team have completed their Oliver McGowan? And my second question was on the Aspire training. And, you know, knowing when I go out and about on wards how positive Aspire is to the teams in terms of morale, motivation and culture. We're a little bit behind on the checks. Will we be able to catch up over the next few months in terms of those audits and feedback to staff?
Thank you, Alison. So I'll start with the Oliver McGowan. Yes, that will form part of the checking, but it's also important to note that commencing in April, the learning and disability team was one of our highest risk business cases, and we've been able to fund that, and the service has just undergone and completed its organisational change review, and that service will move to 7 days a week. And that's really important considering the number of vulnerable patients we have going through our services. It's also an opportunity to relook as well at individualised care plans and the use of the passports, which I think will be really important for this group of patients. So thank you. And Aspire is currently just completing its version 4. I have to think how many versions now we've got. So the ward accreditation programme is now, we are just completing, and yes, we will catch up. That will form the last part of version 3, and then we'll move into version 4. And that's got quite a lot of that cultural skills aspect, not just the fundamentals of care. So we look forward to how that report will then complement the deconditioning report, and we should see better triangulation. So thank you. I should probably say the deconditioning report is looking at falls, pressure ulcers, and all of that harm that we associate with long stays in hospital.
Thanks, Kim. Is that okay, Alison?
Thank you very much.
Steve?
Yeah, great report, really comprehensive, Kim, thank you. Just to check 2 areas. So the report asks us to note the coronary care unit not meeting national level 2 staffing criteria, and noting the renal unit requires an additional 11.5 hours a day of registered nursing capacity. Just to seek assurance that those 2 matters, the risks are appropriately mitigated in the interim, or is there anything that we would need to escalate to board at this point?
No, appropriately mitigated at present, and if we don't get a resolution, we'll bring it back as a highlight, but nothing to escalate to board currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Can I just say this wouldn't be possible without close working relationships with both Ian as finance officer and his team, and Alison and her team, and of course the links with ops. This is absolutely making sure that we're all aligned. We fully appreciate the importance and the well-being of our staff, but we also have a fiscal responsibility to spend our money wisely. So whilst this report's here, it's a combined effort of many. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I spent last Monday at another trust, which is hugely challenged in terms of recruiting nurses and midwives, much more challenged than we are. So it was very interesting to see the comparison. Alison, was that a legacy hand? Or
What's a legacy hand? Sorry, Chair.
Excuse me.
Okay, so I'm just double checking if there's any other contributions. If not, really good report. Thank you. I think for non-executives, it's really good the way that this report goes through each ward and area and gives us a little picture of what it's like. It's really helpful for us.
And yesterday I was asked to share, and I've got a meeting with a fellow CNO to go through. It had been picked up how we'd reported, so that's quite important to be able to share.
So we're noting that we note too much, and then we're noting everything else, which I'm not going to read out because we'd still be behind time rather than ahead. So thank you very much for that, Kim, and all of that will be recorded. So I think that takes us on to Finance and Performance Committee. What I suggest is that we do the finance items, and then if Lindsay allows me, we might have a little break.
That's good.
Because it's good practice to break after about 2 hours. So I think you deserve an early break for good behaviour so far.
Always good practice to break after finance. I think.
So could we go on then to Finance and Performance Committee, Assurance Report to Board, and invite Adrian Davis, the Chair, to introduce it. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, I'm going to take the report as read. We had some very, very good presentations at the committee, one of which Steve mentioned in his report, which was the surgical robot business case. We had a really, really good presentation on that, and I'm really excited for RCHT and the people of Cornwall that we're soon going to have this available, which is really good. A couple of the items have moved on slightly, bearing in mind one of these meetings was January. We expressed concern with the lack of clarity regarding the impacts of hospital H2O implications on the Trust Wave 2 New Hospital Programme and the Women and Children's Programme. I know that has moved on slightly, and we have a debate in private board this afternoon. And we also requested an escalation to the board on the level of risk associated with the e-care programme. And what we were looking at was the potential of less benefits realisation than was in the original business case. And we've asked for some further information to come back to committee in March. Other than that, I will take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adrian. We try and be transparent, and we've got a presumption in favour of dealing with matters in public, but there are certain exemptions, for example, commercial sensitivity, and there are contractors involved both in relation to the new hospital programme and e-care. So we are going to spend time in our private board this afternoon discussing these matters. Obviously, I'll take advice from the Chief Executive and the Company Secretary as to how much we can say in public board. But I just wanted to reassure the public that we will be having a deep dive into these issues this afternoon. So we may not want to replicate that now, and some of it we couldn't replicate. But the matters have been escalated to the attention of the public.
Well, I agree with that, and certainly support that approach, David. Perhaps also to note that Ella as SRO for the e-care programme is actively, Adrian, progressing work to review, test and enable us to be absolutely assured about the potential of either an acceleration of or further benefits from the eCare programme. So we could, through Ella, certainly provide reports with regard to that through the Finance and Performance Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. My suggestion would be that rather than have two overlapping discussions, the board has one discussion this afternoon. Yes. But I'm just checking that around the room, in the virtual room. Lindsay, is that an acceptable way to proceed? So can we thank you for bringing those to our attention, and we'll have a longer and deeper discussion this afternoon, Adrian. Unless there are any other items that any board member wants to check a challenge, we'll move on. But Ella, did you have a point?
I just wanted to add a bit of information on the robot, really, just for the public. I think they'd be interested to know the order has already been placed. We're moving really quickly now that we've got that lengthy business case through, and we've got delivery of the actual robot due on site from the 17th of March, so that the 8-week training programme can commence for staff. And the aim then is to have it operational from June this year.
Great news. It's so beneficial to our patients who won't have to go elsewhere, and also to our surgeons. It helps us attract and retain surgical talent. So it's really good news all around. Thank you, Ella. So if we receive and note that report, bearing in mind we'll have further discussion this afternoon, could we move on to 11.1, which is the month 10 revenue financial report, Ian?
Thank you, Chair. So as usual, I'll take the report as read, but for members of the public, this is the report up to the end of January, so 10 months into the financial year. I'm pleased to be able to report that in month we continued to report a break-even on plan position. And that was, as you'll see in the report, largely in part due to the improvement in care group expenditure levels. And I know and want to just recognise formally the amount of effort that is going into across all parts of the organisation, getting that balance between financial sustainability and good stewardship, along with the challenging operational climate that we face. Our position now then for the 10 months is a 2.4 million deficit. It's worth reminding us that that was at 6.8 million back in July, and our plan was always to have surpluses in the second half of the year. So the fact that we've been able to maintain that is a really positive position. We still though have a 2.4 million deficit. There are 2 months of the year remaining, so that requires us to deliver surpluses of 1.2 million a month across those final 2 months. Our focus of the report and our focus as a board and through the committee structure is absolutely on our forecast outturn position at year end. And you'll see in the report, section 2 focuses on that. The positive news there is that our headline risk that we'd previously assessed continues to come down. So again, in the midpoint of the year, that was in excess of £12 million. Last time we reported to board in private at month 9, that had reduced to 4.6 million, and it's further reduced, as you'll see in the report, it's 2.8 million now. So again, really positive steps. We've set out in the report some of the further steps we've taken with that. So myself and Steve did check and challenge sessions with each of the 4 care groups that hadn't yet hit their control totals. Again, I think Steve and I would both want to recognise the engagement in that process. Absolutely our values were upheld and people really engaged with the challenge and recognising their individual contribution that was needed to that. It is vital that we continue to be relentless in terms of our pursuit of getting to that year-end position. That enables the system to benefit from incentive revenue and capital funding into next financial year, and that's worth around £18 million to the Cornwall system. So that's not just to this organisation, it's to the system. But again, it's really important that we continue to hold our own from a financial delivery perspective. The other elements of the report, so our cost improvement programme, which is we're rebranding as financial sustainability programme going into next year, you'll see in the report that we do have a shortfall against that, and that's partly what's driving some of that risk around our year-end position and the need to mitigate that. We have got some non-recurrent mitigations in place. But you'll also see in there that our level of recurrent savings is at 32.5%. That was picked up through the Finance Performance Committee discussions, and that's a key focus for our improvement director in the final month that they're with us till the end of this financial year. So we continue to do all we can to deliver the maximum amount of recurrent savings in this year and into next. And from a cash perspective, £16.4 million, as you'll see in the report, was our cash balance at the end of January. So that's in line with the plan. There's no concerns to flag on that. And actually, with the receipt of some of our capital from national team over February, that position's improved at the end of February as well. So a healthier cash position at the end of February. So I'll pause there and just take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. I mean, it would be easy to take this for granted, but we shouldn't, because it's a remarkable achievement so far. Yes. Clearly, we need to wait till the end of the financial year, but those of us who read the Health Services Journal will note, week after week, more trusts falling off the perch in terms of financial sustainability. So very good progress. One thing I just wanted to ask you, Ian, you've set up this new financial sustainability programme. Could you tell us what sort of impact, I know it's early days, but what sort of impact is that starting to have?
Yeah, so it is early days. So this is about making sure we've got the appropriate structure in place to have a smooth transition from the external improvement support that we've had in terms of our savings and financial sustainability going forward. So we've set up the colleagues and the internal team that will support this. I'm delighted to say that Doug Riley, one of our previous general managers, is appointed into the senior role leading that team. And that means that it comes from with that lens of operational. So Doug is a theatre practitioner by background, so it has both a clinical and operational led view to it. And that's intrinsic to what we want to achieve next year in terms of our changes will have to be systematic changes. They will have to be about how we develop pathways. They will have to be about how we take all of the opportunities that we have on the back of things like our e-care implementation. And so that's really starting to take shape. We've assigned executive SROs to each work stream. So we've mirrored the successful implementation approach we've had with both things like the e-care programme and with women's and children's, so a programme board structure and senior responsible officers reporting on each of the aspects of that, with scheme leads identified out in the organisation to deliver those. So it's really positive. The whole planning timescale has been brought forward this year. So we submitted our final plans on the 12th of February, and that means that there's more time to make sure those schemes are further developed ahead of April, so that we don't have, there isn't, I think sometimes both staff colleagues and members of the public think that there is a sudden sea change in our financial position between the end of March and the 1st of April. Sadly, that's not the case. And our focus on it needs to be consistent through that period. And our run rate of expenditure and the actions we're taking need to not relent. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But we're providing further update through the Finance and Performance Committee at the next meeting as well on the Financial Sustainability Programme and where we're at with it.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I'm sure the whole board is very grateful to all our staff for improving performance alongside getting on for £50 million. Remarkable achievement. So if you look at our elective care and our cancer care, so important to the people of Cornwall, it's improving alongside a very significant financial savings. So thank you to everyone for that. Are there any comments or questions for Ian on the financial position, the revenue financial position? If not, could we receive and note that report, Ian, with thanks, and move on to the next item, which is the month 10 capital expenditure report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, I'll take the paper as read. A couple of elements just to highlight. So you'll see in section 2 of the report some of the additional funding that we've received during the period. So this is what they call public dividend capital. So this is essentially investment from the national team in Cornwall. And I think it's really important to recognise that. And we should extend our thanks to NHS England for their support with the purchase of the robot. So whilst that funding comes with some dividend payments that we make on an annual basis, it is still significant investment into our health and health infrastructure in Cornwall. And again, the reason that is achieved is through good evidence of financial stewardship across the board. So you'll see there's a number of items in there in terms of the additional funding that we've had in the period. Overall, from a capital perspective, you'll see in the report we're slightly behind plan year to date, so we're at 4.7 million across both our own capital and the public dividend capital. But at this stage, that isn't a concern. We've been working hard through the various groups and forums to mitigate that and bring forward various items. The report sets out where some of that slippage is, where it's expected to recover, and what mitigating steps we're taking for that. And that can include, particularly at this time of year, purchasing some of the additional medical equipment that we might have planned to purchase early next year, where we can bring that forward, where other often more complicated estates-related programmes or procurement-related activities mean that certain schemes slip into the start of the next financial year. Our biggest risk at this point for board members to be aware of is the risk of underspending against our capital budget. So I don't foresee any concerns in terms of overspending against that and breaching our duty there. But the risk of underspend is if we have further late slippage on schemes. We're now on the 5th of March. In terms of ordering anything and having it delivered and owned by the organisation by the end of March becomes trickier once we get past the middle of March. So we're actively working through that. My team have got a good track record, along with the capital subgroups of managing that risk of underspend. Because again, for everybody's awareness, if we don't spend our capital, it's lost to us. It doesn't carry forward into next year. So it's really important that we have plans that make sure we maximise the opportunities we can get from that. The only other item in the paper to note is around the delegation to Finance and Performance Committee for the sign-off of the System Joint Capital Resource Plan. So again, sounds quite technical. What that means is basically that we publish as a system our capital spending plans, so that members of the public can see those and that they're available in terms of our plans. So the board's already signed off our capital programme for next year and future years. So the basis of that joint capital resource plan will be that, but it's due for submission and publication by the 31st of March. So we don't have another board meeting ahead of that. So it will be in line with our submission on the 12th of February, and in line with the plan the board's already received. So that item was just to hopefully seek approval from the board to delegate that authority to Finance and Performance Committee, which meet on the 24th of March ahead of that deadline.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. Anything on the capital programme for Ian? We certainly don't want to send any money back, do we?
No.
Just giving people time to gather their thoughts. It doesn't look like there are any queries on what's a very clear report. I think we do now have to note the position of the capital programme for the period in question, month 10, Ian, and that we do expect to operate within the capital departmental expenditure limit, CDEL, this year. There is a risk of an underspend, but we'll do all we can to mitigate that. And we also need to delegate authority to the Finance and Performance Committee to receive and approve the System Joint Capital Resource Plan. Board content? Thank you. So if we have a break now for 15 minutes, what do you think? Come back at 10 to?
Digital strategy refresh paper was the last item.
Yeah, but we said we'd take the break after.
Okay.
I think we said we'd take the break after the finance item.
Okay.
So we can come back refreshed for your digital strategy, or our digital strategy, Kelvin. So shall we come back at 10 to? Thank you. Oh, there are biscuits here for those who are in the room. So welcome back, everybody. It's 11:50. So, and move on to item 11.5, the digital strategy refresh, with thanks to Kelvin Emerson for a very clear paper. Could I invite you to introduce it, please, Kelvin?
Yes, as I say, we'll take the paper as read, but I'll do a few words of introduction. And probably to start with, this is a refresh of the digital strategy, and it's replacing what was actually our first digital strategy at the time. And when I look back, it was a very different world to today. The Trust had actually been trying to replace its patient administration, which itself dates back to the 1980s. Had been trying to replace that for the best part of 2 decades. But actually, we very quickly recognised that actually we had to be much more ambitious than that, and that we needed a full electronic patient record solution. And actually, we wanted a market-leading solution. So that, over time, has become the eCare programme. But it just shows the kind of scale and complexity of what we're dealing with here, that it's actually many decades, really, to get to the point we're at today with the programme. Lots of other things have been delivered, and I think the point is really all of those changes, whether it's video consultations for patients, our shared care record with Devon, they're all essential foundations for the strategy that we've got today and our ambitions going forwards. So really the strategy is setting out those new goals with that view to what we want to do in Cornwall, neighbourhood care, our ambitions across the Trust, but actually also that being very much aligned with national ambitions around using digital technologies to enable and support healthcare delivery. And actually, with those, I say, we're looking forwards very much to a difference in terms of the patient experience in the future. It really needs to be giving control of care to the people who use our services, whether that's visibility and choice over their appointments, much better access to their health records, but all actually digitally enabled, whilst recognising we also have to support people who have challenges accessing digital, but digital will be a big part of many people's lives. So giving that experience to our patients, and actually what goes alongside that is actually changing our staff's experience of technology, because the same information that we need to share with our patients needs to be much more readily available across the healthcare system. So of course that very much leads us to AI. AI is everywhere in terms of the media, but actually the really exciting developments that are already underway, and actually we'll be hearing more about that in our board strategy and development day on the 19th of March. AI will be a fundamental part of our staff's experience, and I think we'll see it actually much more in terms of the patient experience in the future. And probably the last thing to say...
Apologies to interrupt, Peter, we've just lost the screen. I'm not sure. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so probably the other thing to call out really in terms of that change in experience is, again, really continuing to grow the collaboration capabilities that we've introduced over the last few years. As I say, when I look back to the beginning of the strategy, every meeting used to be face-to-face, and actually we couldn't really do without the collaboration capabilities. And again, neighbourhood really wouldn't work if we all had to travel to every corner of the county for every single meeting. So technology, say, very much underpinning the plans and aspirations for neighbourhood. So that's an introduction. I'm sure there are lots of questions. I'm very happy to answer.
It was inevitable that the screen would go down as you were presenting the digital strategy. Thank you. Could I just ask you around the operational plan that would need to accompany this in terms of the resources that you'll require? Are you confident about the resource base to deliver this?
Yeah, so, and I should have said actually that over the course of the last strategy, we've been very successful in securing national funding to support these programmes. It's been a big part of how we've been able to invest and grow capabilities. So many of the significant initiatives over the next few years are already in our capital plans, and finance colleagues have shared that with board members. Our kind of operational plan for next year is obviously factored on, in a large part, programmes that are in flight now. eCare is a very big part now and will be a big part of our plans next year as well. So, but it draws out, I think, the point of, even though it's a 5-year plan, we will continue to refresh actually each year as we're doing an update to the capital plan and adapting to the availability of of any opportunities to bid for funding. There is a new national programme coming called Frontline Productivity, and there are a number of the things that we've been working on over the last few years that are actually well placed to actually then build on bidding for funds in that way.
Thank you. I mean, according to the nature of the beast, we know that this will inevitably change as the world changes. But I thought it was really good because, you know, when you go through these things, you think, will it mention this, will it mention that? And it gradually ticks them all off as you go through. So I thought it was really comprehensive. Thank you. Comments or questions? Or Ian, did you have any comments?
So I think Kelvin's already touched on the main bit, that we've made sure that between our two teams that we've got the alignment of the funding delivering the strategy that's set out here. You've touched on the other point I was contemplating there, Kelvin. So that in section 5, it has the roadmap of where we'll be, and I think some examples in that, particularly things like ambient voice technology. It might be that comes quicker than 2027 in terms of our deployment of it, depending on funding opportunities. And obviously, we've got pilots underway at the moment. So I think just having that awareness that we will need to see a kind of an updated position on it through board periodically to make sure that we've got that, because opportunities might present themselves faster than we're expecting at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that was part of the feedback of the Finance Committee. Wearables as a technology, the date that's really in the plan is talking about when it's actually effectively a completely integral and normal part of service delivery. And sometimes there's a long process from trials, early adoption, to things becoming fully embedded. So again, I think we'll probably put interim milestones in as we develop those capabilities over the period.
And the opportunities for greater efficiency for clinicians are really, you know, it's beginning to step change, isn't it? I just wanted to check that with you, Ian, from your point of view as Chief Financial Officer. But then we've got a number of people who would like to comment. First of all, could we go to John Foster?
Thanks, Kevin. Really interesting report, and good to see the depth of some of the sections in this. You've touched on it slightly when you spoke, but I was surprised, I think, not to see the shift to neighbourhoods pulled out more, I guess, more explicitly in those sort of key priorities, the top 7 there. And I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about how you saw those directly addressing that shift out of the hospital, because it feels as a sort of a gut instinct that digital should be quite a key enabler to that.
So it's probably worth starting with the way that the strategy has been developed is that we actually work with system partners in the development. So we've effectively captured all of the system needs, including neighbourhood, but with them obviously producing organisational specific versions of the strategy. This is the RCHT one. There'll be an ICB element and a CFT as well. Neighbourhood within that, our colleagues who are working on neighbourhood, Ella has shared an early draft of the blueprint for neighbourhood, and the blueprint for neighbourhood in the digital section, which we've also contributed to. Probably the key elements within there that are actually also reflected in our planner is sharing of information. So our shared care record solution, which is system-wide and actually also shared with colleagues in Devon, will be a fundamental part of neighbourhood. The collaboration capabilities I've just touched on again, where we take for granted now that we can set up meetings and actually multidisciplinary teams can get together from across the whole county and multiple organisations. And we're also commissioning a piece of work, which was referenced within there, to actually develop the architecture for all of this from a neighbourhood lens. So that's actually something I'll share that study when it comes out, which I think will probably build on some of the elements of the strategy in more detail, and will draw out conversations that we have with colleagues in the third sector. We've been working with third sector colleagues for a while, particularly in the world of digital inclusion. But actually, we need to find a way of going beyond just the shared care record to actually integrating their platforms into the wider ecosystem. So it's quite a lot to come in that space.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go to Alison next. Then I'm going to go to Ella because she had a physical hand up before some of the virtual hands, and then to Robin and to Aled. So, Alison.
And me, Chair. Got my hand.
Sorry, Richard, you're next, actually.
Yeah.
I put my hand down to all the
I like to queue, but be called.
Number one.
I'm ready to be seen now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, but first and foremost, just to echo your words, David, I thought it was a really, really clear, coherent strategy. All Kelvin's work and documents are really clear, and it means a lot to people like me who are not so digitally confident. So that's what I wanted to ask about. I mean, this is very much a workforce transformation program. So I wanted to get a sense from you how we're addressing digital exclusion amongst staff, particularly staff who are maybe older and less digitally confident. Have we got enough investment in workforce development? And how do we measure our culture digitally? So beyond people using it to optimising use of technology and how we build in staff feedback.
Yeah. So we work with colleagues from Cornwall Council in terms of digital inclusion. They've got an excellent digital inclusion service, and we said we didn't want to effectively reinvent what they're doing. And obviously a lot of that's focused on the people who use our services, but starting to build now as a dialogue with a number of organisations who do work with NHS organisations in supporting staff with digital inclusion themselves. We're already actually sponsoring some apprenticeships, but they're probably more in the more advanced side of digital. So people are looking actually at AI and data analytics. So we need a complementary offering, which we need to work up, which I think is about general confidence around using technology, and actually probably allowing people to bring their own personal experience. I think because the technology we use sometimes seems complex, people forget that actually if you can do home banking, if you can book your holidays online, those skills are transferable to using these solutions. But I think we need to provide more support and help in terms of making that kind of shift.
Okay, Richard? Yeah. Now we go to Alison.
I was going to comment on that as well. Thank you. I suppose it's really great to see Darcy's aspiration in terms of that shift from analogue to digital really, continuing in this refresh strategy. Kelvin, thank you. And I was going to comment on about the development of the AI skills and the fact that we have got several apprenticeships actually in their second year of maturity in Cornwall, particularly, as you say, on that AI aspect. And that includes staff within finance and within HR teams as well. So, and those apprenticeships continue to grow. I was also sort of recognising in terms of, the benefits around from a clinical perspective as well as an administrative perspective. The more that we have digital, the more that we have joined up systems, the more that people can actually from a career pathway and empowerment in terms of, not being bogged down with basic administration. Is fantastic to see that journey, and that includes obviously the work that Ella's leading on e-care. I also just want to make the point around Kelvin and I work quite closely in my role as CSIRO, because obviously there is a cyber aspect to the work that we're doing here with.
Just want to tell the public what a CSIRO is.
Yeah, Senior Independent Responsible Officer, thank you, Chair. So that's around sort of the assurance aspects of cyber security. So independent of being a technical expert, which Kelvin is.
I don't mark my own homework, I think is the...
Yeah, exactly. So, and then just lastly, from a people and OD perspective, over the last year, we've been transitioning the pod team, as we call it, and the work that we have done is very much in line with bringing in more digital, making the use of which, again, in this strategy of robotic processing automation, RPA, and also maximising the use of agents, Copilot being an example of this. So what we've done with the restructure is sort of position ourselves again to embrace more technology. On a point of clarity, since this document's been put together, unfortunately, although both trusts were rated as being high in terms of digital maturity and assessment from an HR perspective, we didn't get the funding for being an early adopter. So probably need to just update the paper on that. However, what has been announced in the last week is that London and the South West will get the funding for what's called the HR target operating model. And again, you're going to see digital acceleration through that programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Ella.
Yeah, I just wanted to feedback that this has been developed in collaboration with the strategy team, just for that assurance of our non-exec directors. You'll see that feed, I think, in terms of the language and the structure, in terms of it does support what we stated in our new refresh strategy. And this is trying to be really clear on the digital elements of that, isn't it? Also, I wanted to just emphasise, which I think Calvin's already covered partially, but that from a neighbour perspective, the information element of this comes up time and time again as an ask from people who are trying to implement neighbourhood around, we have to get better at our capabilities of sharing information. And I think this strategy does address that, but I want to kind of emphasise why that's so important. And that's kind of the new world of breaking down organisational barriers and boundaries applies to information as well. And I think we've got many of the digital enablers now, but there is the kind of practical stuff around how do we share patient information in a way that is safe and really opens up care opportunities for people.
I completely agree. And actually, the final stage, once we made the edits following feedback today, is actually the strategy will be put into the same format as the trust strategy, so that's sort of visually comparable as well. But exactly as Ella was saying, the information sharing challenge is it's not that there is no information sharing. There's actually a lot of solutions that move information between different areas, but they tend to be things that have been developed at a point in time. They're very specific. And so when somebody actually has a new need, it's really hard to develop something new. So we're trying to approach the problem from how do we share effectively in general and actually involve it from the clinician's point of view of sitting in front of a screen and wanting to access something. So we're trying to take a different approach to that problem.
So I've got Robin, Aled and Adam in that order. If anyone else wants to contribute, could they put their hand up? Otherwise, after Adam, I think we should probably move on. Is that your hand up, Kim, or are you? Robin.
Thank you, Chair. So the strategy is exactly the direction of travel that we need to be taking. And I think for me, it's a challenge to us in that you mentioned earlier, Calvin, that everybody's now used to using their mobile phone for their banking apps, paying for things. When you book a holiday, you've got so much control yourself. We as an organisation, we are going to have to relinquish control to our patients, which is right and good. But that is going to take us a while, I think, to work through how we do that. I think there's a challenge for us to take away, not necessarily debate here, Chair, on how do we make sure that our organisation is able to be flight of foot with some of these new developments, because some may come quite quickly. And if they come quite quickly, we would want to enable our staff and our patients and the population of Cornwall to benefit from them. So I think there's a challenge for us to take into one of our exec spaces as to how will we be able to stay safe, use the new technologies that emerges, but enable our population to have it as soon as is possible. And it aligns to what's in the strategy document. It's just our challenge going forward to how we do it.
And also, Robin, because staff and the general public will be adopting at different rates and have different capabilities.
Exactly.
There's a huge training issue, isn't it?
And balancing our need to maintain or not create an inequality as we charge forward in one direction, make sure we bring everybody with us.
Digital inequality. thank you for that. I think we ought to note that. And then we go on to Aled.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a really good strategy. Just going back, I was going to make the same point as Richard made about digital exclusion. And it was really good to hear your response to that, Kelvin. But I think it'd be really good to have that in the strategy a little bit more. There's also, and kind of interlinked to that, is on the front sheet of the paper. I mean, it's a technicality, but I think it's important for us kind of cognitively to get into this space. Key risk, there's clinical key risks here. So what's marked in the box is financial because it comes under FPC, and reputational, absolutely right. But I think clinical needs to be checked, that box as well. And that leads on to my related point is it sits in FPC, but there are clearly quality and people and culture issues to this. So where do we get that overview in terms of the cross-cutting nature of digital and technology? So, I mean, I'm happy to take that as a rhetorical question for us to pick up again. But, is it a board? Is it FPC? Do we need to see some aspect of this, a QAC and PCC as well? But yeah, I think it's just surfacing some of those things. But yeah, really good. And yeah, really good strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I've just whispered to Lindsay and she's happy to consider that and to see how, where we've got cross-cutting themes, we make sure that all the perspectives of our committees come to the board. Thank you for that point, Aled. And then we go to Adam Broom.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. We discussed this at Finance and Performance Committee and it was very well received. And I think we made the point, which has kind of been touched on by lots of people, that it'd be really valuable to bring this to life a little bit more in terms of what's this going to look and feel like if we deliver this successfully for 2031. What am I going to experience as a patient? What am I going to experience as a member of staff? What am I going to experience as a partner organisation in terms of the relationship with RCHT? And turning it into something that we can all grab hold of, I think would be really helpful.
Which we'll see some of that in that board strategy. We've literally taken the whole approach of that. I'm going to do a little teaser here. So we are bringing some guests along who are actually going to demonstrate AI capabilities, because I think it's probably the best way to start to kind of visualize what's going on.
I don't think anyone else has put their hand up, so we can probably move on. There are lots to take from this rich discussion, but there's the points about digital exclusion and equitable development. There's the points about how things will change over the next 5 years and how we adapt. I think it's useful to note that there is a resource base hopefully in place to deliver all of this. We'll come back at the board development session for a richer discussion around AI and other developments. There is how all these developments are going to support clinicians and sit alongside all our other digital innovations. So I think those are the main points I made, Ms. Lindsay.
No, that's it. You covered
But those are things that we need to note. Before we move to approval, Adrian, it's not compulsory, but as chair of Finance and Performance Committee, I know you've done a lot of scrutiny of this strategy. Is there anything you wanted to add? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion about it, and we also had the phase 2 of the integration. So we spent a fair bit of our meeting discussing this.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. So with thanks for Kelvin for a very clear strategy and a very clear presentation. Could we approve the digital strategy which takes us up to 2031? Board content? Thank you. And thank you again, Kelvin. So we move now on to item 12, the People and Culture Committee Assurance Report. Richard.
Great, thank you, Chair. So we are going to look at staff survey in EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion separately. So I'm just going to mention one thing, and that's around our key people data. So we at our meetings, we're taking a much more forensic, systematic look at our people data. And last meeting we looked at sickness appraisal and training. And I suppose that the point I want to make is that these are not just people challenges, they're organisational challenges around leadership, capability and cultural issues. So if we look at sickness, which is above our threshold, it's about ensuring that our managers are having early supportive conversations with their staff. We're taking proactive early intervention support around wellbeing, but also that we're managing absence compassionately and firming in a firm way, and using our absent management policy whilst looking at improvement plans for hotspots. And so I think we'll continue to look at key people data, and of course that is linked very much to work on staff survey. So that's all I wanted to say from my perspective, to give us as much time to look at staff survey and EDI work.
Thank you very much, Richard. Are there any questions for Richard? So there's nothing being specifically escalated.
There's a question from Adrian, I think.
Oh, Adrian, I'm sorry, I didn't catch you on the screen there. Adrian?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very, very interesting. I've had an interest in appraisal rates for the last 10 years since I came into the NHS as a non-executive director, and they've never been what I would call really good. And I wondered if we could do an audit around the quality of the appraisals that we run rather than the quantity. Because in my experience, if you have a good appraisal, it's worth its weight in gold. And it improves staff morale, it identifies development opportunities. So I just wondered if that was something that we could factor in going forwards.
Yeah, so over the past 18 months, we've regularly done mini audits on the quality of appraisals, and we know the quality of appraisals is not just about the numbers, it is definitely about the quality. That is something that we've got to improve. Those mini audits are fed back to what was the care groups, and we will hope to continue that work with the appointment of the new strategic workforce business partners going forward, who will be working with the new divisions. So yes, really support that, Adrian. Thank you.
It's outputs as well as inputs, isn't it, Adrian? Ian.
Yeah, thank you. It was just to check, Richard, so absolutely recognise what you described there around sickness absence. I think in the report we're escalating to board the lack of assurance around that. So is there anything further at this point that you don't think is in train that you need from board?
It might be useful, I think we mentioned this last time, to think about the cost implications in terms of reduced productivity, banking and agency as a result of sickness absence. So it might be helpful to arm us with that information from a financial side, because it will very much help make the case to staff and the people side.
Yeah, happy to do that. We'll pick that.
Want to comment on that point, Alison?
Yes, that's something that Robin and I talked about yesterday in the planning that we're doing for setting up the new performance management. And once every 4 weeks, there's going to be a people committee for each, I say committee, that's not the right word, group for each of the divisions, and we talked around the KPIs and actually that sort of language around the cost of absence and making the connections and the interdependencies with your overall staffing levels, including bank and substantive and agency, was something that we discussed.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Adrian's point about the appraisals and the quality assurance. I just wanted to say that all medical appraisals have a validated quality assurance tool applied to them, and that the feedback from that QA tool is then given back to the appraiser that feeds into their continuing professional development and their appraisal. So for the medical staff, that happens in a consistent way.
Good process. Thank you.
Question from Alison.
Alison?
Yeah, just one follow-up question. We are expecting nationally a new appraisal tool for managers. It hasn't arrived yet from the NHS. That's expected, yes.
Adam?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going back to sickness, which Richard raised as Chair of People and Culture Committee. It's just, we're going to come to it in a minute anyway, but just feels appropriate to raise it now. In terms of the report back from Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, we have also flagged sickness. And just to remind everybody, we're all really concerned about sickness. We're all doing a lot of work to try and address sickness. We look at it here in terms of the integrated performance report. I know we all know that. Just to remind everybody, we did an internal audit of sickness during 25-26 financial year, which came back with limited assurance. There's now an action plan in place to address the concerns that were highlighted, and we're comfortable that action plan is in train and being worked through. That's work that will continue during 26-27. So we flagged that for the board's attention as well, building on what Richard said. And effectively, we'll keep that under review through the People and Culture Committee, through the way that we're doing that already. But it's really helpful to hear what Alison said about extra work that's being done around sickness, if I understood correctly. So that was really helpful to hear.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Alison?
Yeah, just as Adam's mentioned, that audit, one of the key things from that audit was around managers not completing return to work interviews. We know that is a key lever in actually either, referring somebody on for additional clinical medical support or addressing actually if there are other underlying issues on why that member of staff is having a period of absence. So it's a really important thing for managers to do to make sure it doesn't need to be long, but as I say, it is important that managers do their return to work interviews. Thank you.
Are there any other comments on this report before we move on? Can't see any. So could we just receive a report with thanks, Richard, and go on to 12.1, the staff survey results? Could I just take a minute to position this? Because again, there's a balance between transparency and confidentiality. The staff survey findings aren't actually scheduled to be published until the 12th of March. But again, in the interests of public transparency, we did want to report that they've been received. In May of this year, this public board will have a full analysis together with recommendations and proposals as to how we take forward the staff survey and learning and improvement as a result. So that will be to come. There'll need to be a period of time after the 12th of March when the executive can consider the results, when we can have a deeper dive and discussion into it. But also, I think, crucially, we have the 4 new divisions starting on the 1st of April to replace the 7 care groups. And certainly personally, I think it's really important that they, as divisions, take ownership of staff satisfaction within their areas and then work with staff, not to them, with them, to see how we develop and improve staff satisfaction. And that process will take a bit of time. So, I hope the public would bear with us while we do that due process and come back to the May board meeting with a full analysis and proposals and a full discussion in public. But nevertheless, I thought it was important that in public, people were aware that these results are in, that they will be published next week, and that we should have some initial discussion. But I hope people will understand that we'll need to be constrained at this stage. So with that context, could I go over to you, please, Alison?
Yes, thank you. I suppose it's useful also in terms of describing the context. When we were actually doing the staff survey, it was at a period of time when we'd launched 3 consultations in the trust for corporate services, for clinical administration colleagues, and for those care group colleagues as well. So it was a tough point to be carrying out our survey, and we will expect to see a workforce that obviously was feeling the brunt of going through major change at that period of time. The second point I'd like to raise is just a really big thank you, because actually in completing the survey, our response rate increased from 47 to 50%, which was an improvement on the previous year and 3% higher than our peers. And I think that's really important because what Steve and I have been saying for the last few years is please do fill in the survey. The more people that fill in the survey, the better information that we have around how our staff are feeling and what their staff experience is. So a thank you for that. We've got some early thoughts around what the priorities might be, and those early thoughts are those, as I say, subject to a lot more conversation, are around quality of appraisals, raising concerns, and the health and safety climate. So that sort of picks up, some of the challenges that our staff face on a day-to-day basis, particularly around violence and aggression, sexual misconduct, bullying and harassment, and discrimination. Although I'm not able to say much more today, but just to highlight another little bit of good news that we think in comparison to previous years that actually our staff experience for our ethnic minority colleagues is better than it has been previously. So those are the highlights that I'd like to bring today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Are there any comments or questions for Alison? Richard?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo things Alison said. I think we've got some headlines here. I think overall the results are disappointing, and it will be. They have uncomfortable findings that we will need to share with the organisation. I agree we should focus on key priority areas rather than try and address everything. So I very much welcome the approach that is being proposed, and it is about very much investing in line management capability. So your points about the divisions and their leadership are really, really important. I think the last point is it's also, whilst we're focusing on some priority areas, we do need to link the work that we're doing through the staff survey with our wider work on culture, because I think it's really important that we can think about culture and look at the indicators about people recommending RCHT as a place to work, which is very much about culture. So I'm very happy with that, with the priorities, as long as they align to the broader work that we need to do as an organisation.
Well, I'd echo the comments that have been made so far, and recognising the constraints in which we're having this conversation with the results not formally published until next week. Nevertheless, the things that Alison has drawn out, I think, are really important. The improvements in the experience of Black and minority ethnic staff are really important. I think what we're seeing is a significant reduction in the proportion of Black and minority ethnic staff who say that they're subject to harassment and racial discrimination. That is a really welcome sign. It is still too high, that there is no tolerance from any of us for racism or harassment, and we want to continue doing whatever we can to address that. But I do think we should recognise that significant progress. And I would like to say thank you to our ethnic minority staff network, particularly for the role that they've played in helping to raise understanding and awareness of the kind of actions that can be taken. That has directly impacted on the actions that this board and the organisation has taken. I also think we should be absolutely clear about the determination to improve staff experience across the whole organisation, and Richard's just reflected that. I think we are all disappointed, and the particular questions that Alison has drawn out, the proportion of staff recommending Royal Cornwall Hospital Trust as a place to work, and the proportion of staff who feel care is our organisation's top priority, looks to have declined significantly. And we would want both of those indicators to significantly improve, that they are key questions. And I know as a board, we all hold that individually and collectively. We've got a really important role to play in our organisation and helping those indicators change, as have our divisions, as have our wider leadership cohort. And we want to work closely with our joint consultative negotiating committee and our staff side partners, and we want to work closely with our staff network. So there is a great opportunity at this point going forward, but we do need to own that. We do need to be clear about the need for improvement. I mentioned the time that Mary and I spent in the emergency department this morning. I just briefly want to segue back to that. One of the colleagues there talked about there was a moment of excellence, leadership, team spirit and compassion that really needs recognising, and they said that that made them feel even more proud to call Royal Cornwall Hospitals home and have the ED staff as my colleagues. That pride in Royal Cornwall Hospitals from that person was really clear. And for me, I think one of the things that we would try to enable is everybody feels that pride, that support, because that would be a key indicator of Royal Cornwall Hospitals being recommended as a place to work and Royal Cornwall Hospitals prioritising above all else care for our patients. So I think we should be holding both the disappointment in the results in this particular year in the context that Alison's described, but an absolute determination to do everything we possibly can to improve that going forward.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's a very important leadership statement for the board, because there's clearly a gap between the board's aspirations and the staff, and that's a gap as a top priority we need to resolve. I think it's worth reflecting on if NHS England had called a staff satisfaction summit as opposed to a corridor summit, what would we be doing today? And that's the sort of emphasis I think we need to give to this. So thank you for that, Steve. Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. And to build on what's been said, I think we've got to release time for engagement and true listening. If we're going to make a substantive inroad into this, with all of the current pressures, how are we going to do that meaningful engagement? We know it's worked well in the past when all members of the senior leadership team have gone out, split up, gone and had those conversations. It's no good hearing and not having the time to be able to meaningfully listen and then feedback. And often it's that feedback loop that's missing. Absolutely agree, Richard. We've got to do that link with our cultural work, but it's about that cultural competency, cultural safety. Do I feel safe to speak up? We can see in freedom to speak up that people still fear retribution. So how do we make sure that we're having those difficult conversations? And let's face it, they're going to be difficult over the next 12 months. We've got all of the other change going on. So it is about carving out meaningful time. The senior leadership teams are going to be key critical here. We can wrap round and support, but one of the main reasons we've done the review and the change that we've done is to give that clinical ownership, accountability. And we know, and you've only got to look at the evidence, if your senior leadership team is driving it, that actually you get practical, forward thinking, and you ensure a difference that everyone can feel on the shop floor. And that will help us bridge the disconnect. We should be, I'll call us Allen keys. We should be the Allen keys going around that's releasing what is true obstacles and blocks, not trying to do the everyday, because we all start acting down. And we know and we've heard that people feel, and they hear us talk about it, that we have a commitment, but that's not what they're experiencing on the shop floor. So it is about, I think, that time to consider next steps. So thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Needless to say, I'm all for Allen keys. Any other comments on this, please? I think bearing in mind that there's going to be an awful lot more work on this, and I really think it's important that it's done with staff, so that we satisfaction surveys tell you how people are feeling, but they don't really tell you why. So, there's a lot of work to be done to really understand, and of course, across different groups of staff and across different parts of the organisation. So there's lots of moving parts. And we also need to remember that half of our staff didn't complete the survey. So there's lots of things to consider. But I think Steve's set a path for us to travel. So can we note the initial high-level staff survey findings, note that they're going to be published on the 12th of March, and come back to them at our May board meeting, as well as our other private board discussions. Thank you very much. 12.2 is the biannual equality report. Alison.
Thank you. So I'm just going to cover a few key highlights from the paper. The paper outlines that the People and OD team is transitioning to a new model, and that's sort of a more consultancy advisory space to support EDI going forward. And as I outlined a few minutes ago, we're looking to the new divisional management teams to sort of really hold those people-related metrics and outcomes going forward. This report sets out our compliance and proposals for 26. We are legally required to meet the public sector equality duties. In 2024, we actually set out a plan, which was a system plan, and we agreed joint equality objectives. And I just want to assure the board for 25-26, we've met all our statutory and mandatory EDI compliance. Just sort of going back to those equality objectives that we approved in 2024, because I think they still hold value and weight. So the first one was about creating a culture of belonging and enabling staff to bring their authentic self to work. Role modelling positive behaviours to tackle bullying, harassment and discrimination. And ensuring that when we carry out recruitment, that it's equitable and it provides career growth, as well as obviously from a mechanics perspective, ensuring that we have panels that are set up in a diverse perspective to ensure equitable outcomes. And then the fourth one, really importantly, that we involve patient communities in designing our services. And obviously we've touched a lot on the direction of travel in terms of changes in clinical pathways this morning, as well as discussions around neighbourhoods. So in terms of the proposed plan for 26-27, there's a lot of tie-in to the staff survey, but we will continue to work with our divisional leadership teams to help support, drive action and make improvement locally. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Awesome. Any questions for Alison? John, anything?
We slightly covered it, but I was just interested, thank you, Chair, in I suppose the capacity of some of our colleagues, particularly in the new divisions and in your team, Alison, the sort of the people team pod, to really deliver on some of these actions we've got held over from previous years and we're still committing to. We're acknowledging they're really important, but I'm really aware a lot of the conversation we've had this morning and having over the course of all our governance meetings is you've got a busy team, and I'm just wondering if we should be concerned and if there's anything board can do to support them in delivering on some of this.
It is in this transition period now, rather than the delivery being within my team, it then moves to equipping our senior leaders and embedding processes, action plans within divisions, and through that performance monitoring within divisions that will support, will provide training, etc. But the delivery will be held within divisions going forward. Thank you.
A very important change, the divisions, because they're going to be the engine rooms of delivery. Adrian and then Ian. Adrian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Building on that point, Alison, your paper talks about savings and the cessation of management and leadership development being delivered by the People and OD team. Can you just assure me that we are still providing leadership and management development for staff? Because I think, again, this links back to the previous issue that we've talked about with regards to the staff survey.
Yeah, so we paused our leadership programmes that were being facilitated through the People and OD team. We have some, whilst we went through this period of change, I think what the Culture Task and Finish group is doing is then in working with myself, Ella and myself, then looking at about what do we need for the future. But there was a deliberate decision made in terms of pausing those programmes within those teams.
I may have imagined this, Alison. Are we awaiting some leadership and management guidance nationally as well?
We are, that's correct. So there is a new framework that's due, particularly around manager competencies, which will then affect appraisals, and it will also then be something that we can then use to create what we need in terms of that management and leadership development piece in the future.
When that arrives, People and Culture will take a look at that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Adrian. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my point kind of builds on John's point. I think it's that concern of the capacity of teams to make sure they're across all of the things that we will be requiring them to be. And I think we just need to be really alert to that. And so things such as this, which are incredibly important, can't play second fiddle to key operational targets, as we talked about earlier in the urgent emergency care papers and things. And I do wonder if when the paper talks about sharing of data, I think we do need to be curious about where AI can help our frontline teams to analyse the initial data and to give us those kind of prompts. So we know staff survey data, equality data, etc. There'll be a number of things. We've got an excellent people dashboard that gets circulated. There's a number of ways of triangulating that data, which if you're doing it at an individual level per division will take a significant amount of time. So I think we just, as part of the development session that we've got as a board on AI later in the month, there's something about how do we use that to do some of the heavy lifting and the triangulation that would take a lot of people hours to do, so that important leadership time can be spent on embedding and delivering that change rather than trying to work out where are the pockets that need that support.
I'll put my hand up because I'm channeling Uzma, and this is the very point that she made at People and Culture, that we need to do much more around performance frameworks and local accountability. And there was a specific point that she made that we don't fully incorporate the EDI data in our IPR reporting, so it doesn't have that provenance that it should do. And I think that was one of the things that we're going to take away and look at.
Circling back to Adrian's point, because he was looking for assurance, what about the leadership support for the new divisional teams? Are they going to be provided with the support they'll need to lead and develop their new divisions?
Yeah, so this will be part of the role of the new strategic workforce partners, and we're actually this week in the process of, in fact, interviews are probably happening right now of appointing those roles.
Any other points on this? So thank you for that. So we're just noting, I think, that report with your comments and the board comments, Alison. And also we need to continue the focus on statutory and mandatory compliance as well. 12.3 is for formal approval, I think, by the board, because the board, it's a reserved matter for the board, but it's been gone over carefully before it's come here. But is there anything you'd like to say, Alison?
Well, just in support of that, this is a refreshed policy, and it outlines the trust commitments under the Equality Act and the Public Sector Equality Duty. As you said, Chair, it's gone through multiple consultations through the Employee Network Group, JCNC, JLNC, and People and Culture Committee, who've all supported, and our executive leadership team too, have all supported this refreshed policy for today. Thank you.
Well, unless there are any questions or comments, I think I should put it to the board for formal approval. Board content? Thank you very much. So we've approved the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion policy. Thank you, Lindsay. So thank you for those matters, Richard and Alison. Could we now move on to the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee report and invite Adam Broom, the Chair, to introduce it. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Audit and Risk Assurance report for Committee Assurance Report for February last month. We covered, as you would expect, a number of items which have subsequently come to this board meeting. So we discussed those, reviewed those, made suggestions, agreed those as appropriate, including the board assurance framework that we're considering next, the corporate risk register later on our agenda, gifts, hospitality, sponsorship, declaration of interests report, and a couple of items that were mentioned in the Chief Exec's report, Steve's report earlier, around the provider licence, annual self-assessment and the code of governance for NHS provider trusts were all considered by the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. Also wanted to highlight really good progress on emergency preparedness, resilience and response standards, and a number who have been successfully ticked off, which is really great to recognise. And then two items to flag for the board's attention, one of which we've mentioned already was around staff sickness, and I'm not proposing to say any more about that. We've discussed that. The other one was around, in a similar vein, there was a internal audit of staff sexual safety or sexual safety generally across the hospital in 25-26, which again highlighted limited assurance. There's an action plan in place to address the concerns from internal audit. That's work in progress. I know we all know that, but given the significance of the issue, we wanted to bring that back to the board's attention. It won't next be looked at in detail by internal audit probably until 27-28 financial year. So we wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Again, that will be looked at in more depth through the People and Culture Committee.
Thank you very much, Adam. And as members will recollect, that report talked about the arrangements for reporting and how reporting can be captured, and also about training. So there was a lot of rich content in that report. And of course, there's also staff survey reflections, which we'll need to consider. And I'm sure, Steve, you would make the same point about zero tolerance as you made about racial harassment.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had those explicit conversations in the board in previous discussions. So I think we're all absolutely aligned on the imperative of sexual safety across our organisation for staff, for patients and for visitors.
Thank you, Adam. Any comments or questions from board members for Adam? If not, could we note the report from the February 2026 meeting of ARAC, Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, with thanks, and move on to item 13.1, the Board Assurance Framework. Lindsay.
Thank you. Just a reminder, the BAF is presented after it's been through committee meetings and Audit and Risk Assurance Committee and following review by the Executive Lead. They're made in track changes for ease and for transparency and are summarised in the report. So I won't go into any of the detail, but it's just important to note that the BAF was last approved by the board in January. It's of note, and it's highlighted in the report, that in January the board approved the trust strategy and a communications and engagement plan is being developed, and the board assurance framework will be updated in light of that new strategy and its refreshed strategic objectives. Just to draw a few things to board members' information is the BAF has been updated in particular around our UEC position, that's our urgent and emergency care, and the actions being taken to improve that and eradicate corridor care. We talked about a lot of these things today, but there's a new gap in assurance relating to the ability to eradicate corridor care and the actions being taken. Just to highlight around our financial position and our focused approach to mitigate risk and achieve our break-even position. Continued focus on delivery of e-care go live and ensuring the benefits realisation is achieved within the financial envelope. The actions that we're taking in response to our staff survey and our continued focus around culture and improving absence. Lastly, to draw board members' attention to is that a new gap in assurance that we've included within our estate BAF element around the proactive fire management testing that we're doing, which is responding to concerns and also concerns raised around health and safety. I'm pleased to say that our Chair of Audit and Risk Assurance Committee was recently invited to a South West Audit Forum meeting, which is actually going to be looking at good practice and will be actually exploring the development of a system assurance framework. And that is something that we've been talking about for quite a while and is very welcome. There are a number of resolutions, Chair, I won't go through them all. Hopefully they're self-explanatory.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, and thanks for the eagle eye you keep on all of this. Are there any comments or questions for Lindsay, please? It's very comprehensive analysis and the gaps well identified. So, like Lindsay, I'm not going to read them all out, but we do need to note and approve where appropriate all of them. So thank you for that. Item 13.2 is gifts, hospitality and declaration of interests policy board assurance. Lindsay?
Thank you. The policy comes to board as it is a matter reserved for board. So the purpose is to seek agreement for the inclusion of an escalation flows chart into the existing policy. It's been through Audit and Risk Assurance Committee and they are recommending it for approval. Basically, the flow chart will be used when it's known that a member of staff is required to make a declaration of interest. And it's been identified that they haven't completed a declaration. So therefore, it's recommended that we include this. So we provide that clear guidance to staff and management on the steps that will be taken should a request for a declaration be made, and that is not acted upon.
Thank you, Lindsay. Just for the avoidance of doubt, it's a nil return from your chair.
Let's see, is there an arrow missing on the flowchart? Between the big box and the one below it?
What?
Response received by...
Well, I'll have a look. And we'll... Oh, yes, there is, yeah. Yeah, thank you. We'll fix that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mary. So, arrow to be inserted. This is the chart on page 1 of 1. Subject to that, is board content with this policy? Thank you. So that's approved, and then we go on to the Remuneration and Appointments Committee Assurance Report. This committee is chaired by the Vice Chair or the Senior Independent Director, in this case, who happens to be the same person, Isabel Down, because of course it's all to do with individual remuneration. There's not a huge amount other than policy we can talk about at public board. But I think we need to take it as read and note it, given that Isabel isn't here. Lindsay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Then item 15, the Integrated Performance Report. Many of the key aspects we'll have already considered, but this is here to enable Robin to sweep up anything we haven't covered or anything he'd like to bring to our attention.
I think we've had a really good set of conversations through all the various papers, Chair. I think the bit that I would just draw colleagues' attention to is in the Quality Assurance Committee, we did note the improvements on fractured neck of femur, which has been subject to a number of deep dives led by Mary, our Chief Nursing Medical Officer, get my tongue straight, and actually remained under continued review by the committee. We also noted through the committees the challenge that we are facing for our stroke patients having direct admission to the stroke unit within 4 hours. And whilst that would be all encompassed within our urgent and emergency care conversation and the actions we're taking, I wouldn't want it to not be noted that, again, the Quality Assurance Committee undertook a review of our actions that we're taking specifically related to our stroke services. All other elements that have been in my notebook for the IPR have been covered through the conversation this morning.
The action plan on fractured neck of femur is making progress as well.
Yeah.
It's coming back to Quality Assurance Committee next month.
So are there any comments or questions or analysis for Robin on the Integrated Performance Report, which brings everything together? Ian?
Yeah, I just got one, Robin, if that's all right. As you say, we cover it in a number of different committees. 65-week wait, so we were supposed to have hit a national requirement to eliminate that by the 21st of December. The report notes that we didn't achieve that, and I know in the IPR graph we've made a tremendous inroads in that over the period of time of that chart, but we still do have 10 patients on the pre-submission figures for January. So I just wondered, what's our expectation when we think we can get to a 0 over 65-week RTT position for our patients?
Thank you, Ian. So we have not yet got a final. This will be our 0 date. The main driver for that is in our orthopaedic specialty. There's a subspecialty within orthopaedics where we are almost concluding finalising an additional resource to come in and support the capacity for that subset of operations, which when we've got that finally locked in, then we'll be able to forecast the additional activity that they will be able to do, which will then bring us under the 65-week.
Anything to add, Ella? Thanks for that, Ian. Any other comments? I can't see any, so could we note the IPR with thanks to Robin? And then we turn ourselves into the corporate trustee to receive the report of the Charitable Funds Committee. And that's chaired by Richard.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one point I wanted to draw the board's attention to. So in our meeting, as part of the discussion on the financial investment performance report, we looked at income and expenditure trends, and we also discussed the decline of cost to income ratio. So what that means is the amount being spent on fundraising is continuing to rise, but income is not tracking in the same direction. And we did discuss that. We noted that the new lottery, when it comes on stream, will generate additional funds, that we would have a fundraising appeal connected to the family accommodation project. And of course, the new team is settled in following some minor structural changes. So whilst we noted future income streams, we did request closer monitoring and forecasting for future assurance at subsequent meetings. So that was the issue I wanted to draw attention to.
And you looked at the fundraising ratios between cost and income as well, which is a good indicator. Yeah. Ian.
Yeah, and I think just for clarity, Chair, on that really good point, thank you for raising it, Richard. Just for clarity for members of the public or staff watching as well, so we benchmark against the industry standard for a return which is 4-1, so we've fallen below that level compared to where we've been previously. But it is still positive. We are still raising more money than we are spending, just to be explicitly clear on that. So it's about where we've started to just dip below that benchmark rather than a more systemic issue. I wouldn't want people to read too much into that, but absolutely right to raise it, Richard.
Philanthropic giving continues to be really important to us, and I'm sure we would all like to thank everyone who supports the work of the hospitals philanthropically. And we're seeing all around the hospitals the results of that philanthropy in better facilities for patients and their families and visitors. So thank you for that, Richard. Could we note that report if there are no further comments? Section C lies on the table and is taken as read. No members have asked for anything to be moved from Section C to Section B. So all those items are noted and approved where applicable. Which takes us on to Section D, other matters. The first one, item 19, is the summary consideration of risks that have arisen as a result of our conversations this morning. And Lindsay has taken a careful note of them.
Thank you. Areas we've covered today, I think, are areas that are already represented on our corporate risk register and within our board assurance framework. If I just quickly run through, obviously, UEC position and the risk 9048, which is on corporate risk register, still remains our highest risk of 25, but we've reflected in our board assurance framework clearly around the actions that we're taking in response to corridor care, but obviously that still remains a gap. We've talked about e-care and women's and children's programmes. Both programmes are represented within their own programme board risks and on the corporate risk register and on the BAF, but there's always more that we can do as they're ever-changing positions. Our financial position is well represented on our board assurance framework as a principal risk around delivery of our year-end position, but we're mitigating that well. lastly, staff survey, that'll be something that we will need to consider as BAF element 2 and around our workforce and how we're responding to that, because that obviously will be a challenge for us. And otherwise, in that, Chair, I don't think there's anything that I would suggest that there's anything new to add in here. I think we've covered everything. Thank you. Unless anyone's got any comments.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any board members have anything to add in terms of the risk profile? So if not, could we note Lindsay's analysis of those additional risks arising? But most of the risks are already covered. We then move on to questions from the public, and again, I'll hand over to Lindsay.
Thank you. So today we've had about 30 to 40 people watching on our live stream today, which is really positive. We've had one question this morning, and I'm going to pose that to Ian if that's possible. A colleague, a member of staff, has raised the question saying in the NHS, the NHS is subject to 1.34 billion of fraud every year. This is obviously a shocking statistic. What, as a trust, do we have in place to help ensure we don't add to that statistic? I'll go to Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for the question. Really important one, and as you rightly point out in that question, a shocking statistic in terms of the scale of fraud that unfortunately the NHS is subjected to. So in terms of what the organisation has, we have a local counter-fraud service provision, which is provided as part of a peninsular agreement for a number of trusts across the southwest. So that includes a counter-fraud specialist, and they are part of a networked arrangement with access to the full UK-wide team that look into counter-fraud. So they share experiences of fraud elsewhere in the NHS that we can learn from. From a responsibility perspective and a governance perspective, myself as Chief Finance Officer, I'm the accountable officer from a counter-fraud prevention perspective. We also have Adam Broom as non-executive director as the non-executive lead from a counter-fraud perspective, and we have a report to each meeting of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee on counter-fraud and the actions and steps being taken. We have a programme of work through the year which is both reactive and proactive. So that's proactively about how can we prevent fraud, but it's also reactive about where we get reports of fraud. And I would take the opportunity to encourage any member of staff or the public who see any fraudulent activity or anything they suspect to be fraudulent to report that through the organisation's structure. You can find it on our intranet and through contacting Switchboard if you need to, in terms of reporting anything that looks suspicious. There's also a submission we do which is called the Counter-Fraud Functional Standards Return. That's an assessment we do every year of how we're achieving against a number of standards. We've been green across the board on those standards for a number of years. We've also been recognised nationally as exemplar in terms of our approach to counter-fraud work, which is really positive. And there's a lot of work that teams can do, so staff being vigilant is really key. We have a Fraud Awareness Week, usually takes place in November, which we use as an opportunity to get out around the organisation promoting how to report fraud, what to look out for. And it's very similar to the sort of thing you see in your day-to-day lives as members of the public or as individuals, whether that be banking-related fraud, impersonation type things, phishing that we get through from a digital perspective. So all of those sorts of things. So not only does it keep the organisation safe, it can help people learn about how they can keep themselves safe as well. So an excellent question, but hopefully that helps give some assurance on the scale of things that we've got in place across the organisation.
Thank you very much, Ian. Very comprehensive. And thank you for the question. So that does complete questions from the public.
Yes, thank you.
We go on to item 21, meeting effectiveness evaluation, and it just gives us the opportunity to pause and reflect, not to review our decisions, but to think about what worked well, what could have worked better, and all the other things that are listed on the agenda paper. So is there any feedback from board members? If not, there is. Robin.
We say it a few times now, but just when you think the breadth is in the integrated performance report, you can see how the committees have done the phrase heavy lifting through the committees, that actually what is a very big report had a very small section because it had been covered through the agenda here and the amount of work that was done through the committees. And I think, Adrian, that the deep dive that we did in Finance Performance Committee also facilitated that well. So it's a comment about another committee as well, Chair.
Comments? Ian?
Yeah, I thought it was a really, really good meeting. It felt like it was well paced in terms of the level of discussion on each of the papers. I guess I'm just prompted slightly to wonder, how do we test the effectiveness of the meeting for people observing it, members of staff, members of the public, and whether we need to think about how it's experienced. So we talked, and I know when you introduced at the start of the meeting, David, you talked about not using acronyms and things. I do wonder, how do we test the accessibility of our public board meetings with members of the public?
Well, I'm sure we'd be very happy to receive comments from people who've been observing. We just need some sort of mechanism to do that, Lindsay.
Yeah, we could do a survey. We could, at the end of each meeting, we could include a survey that asks people to give us the feedback.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. We get a positive feedback loop to help us improve. Are there any other comments? Okay, so the next meeting of the public board is the 7th of May. I just wanted to test with the board. We could, subject to a check with Uzma, if she's joining us, we could perhaps start the private board at 1:30 rather than wait till 2 o'clock. Because everybody, apart from Uzma, who may or may not come, everybody who's coming to the private board is already here. Shall we do that? Okay, then, so I'll close the public meeting with thanks to all the members of the public and staff and others who stayed with us. And we'll reconvene at 1:30 for the private board. Thank you all very much for your attendance.
Thank you.